Dude, imagine living your best life when, out of nowhere, you're just sucked out of reality and end up on another planet, falling into the middle of a massive forest that covers everything. Before they could do anything, that entire area was already being struck, and the protagonist starts running, trying to save his life in the middle of all that chaos. And in the midst of this, a girl without around, but he questions what she's talking about. He explains that, to become a true returnee who can pass through a portal, a person has to kill monsters and steal their dimensional energy. But it seems that the guy over there, despite managing to survive in a peaceful dimension, crossed through the portal upon encountering a return stone, put it to luck, saying that she was really wrong. But, he says it wasn't 10 years, and that he stayed in that jungle for 1,000 years. And with him insisting on this, she says that he is really starting to irritate her, saying that it wasn't 1,000 years, but only 10, but he doesn't like what she's saying at all. So she tells him to look at his information, saying that it is, saying he disappeared in 2015 and returned in 2025 through the portal. And the boy is very surprised, because only 10 years have passed. Then she hands him a card, telling him to get his identification as an awakened. So he is even more surprised upon receiving that card, and she says that a portion of his expenses will be deducted through that ID. Then she asks him, please inform him if he loses it, and tell him to make sure he reads the documentation carefully. Today, when he recovers, he must return to his family, simply saying goodbye, and leaving. And with the boy staying there, he's very surprised by the beautiful things that are there, noticing that his entire family is still alive. Well, we might have a case here similar to Does in that theory that he is simply vegetating while dreaming that he is catching Pokemon for many, many decades, or the protagonist really lived it all, in a world where time moves at a very different, changed speed, and he remembers that he had given up on everything and had assumed that even if he returned to Earth, his friends and family would already be dead. And now that he's back, he has to accept the fact. Knowing what he was doing, he asks someone for help, while the protagonist tries to call her closer to keep her safe, but an ambulance falls directly on the girl's head, crushing her completely. That he lost his forest family, who stayed with him for 1,000 years. Then, he couldn't help but feel despair, as he was alone again. But that was just his assumption, because since that time, only 10 years have passed. But he sees in the report that his father and mother died during the 2015 dungeon break, which surprises him, and he ends up noticing that John R. is still alive and tells them to get out of the way because he needs to see Dr. Baldy. However, the nurse tells him that he can't just barge in. He runs straight to the doctor's room and invades out of nowhere. The nurse even tries to stop him, but the protagonist continues towards him. However, even with the boy's sudden intrusion, Dr. Baldy speaks directly to him, asking if there is some problem. The protagonist says that he needs his help, and Dr. Baldy questions what kind of help the boy needs. He reveals that his younger brother is still alive, asking how he can find him, asking them to let him out of there right away. But then, he says that he won't let him out until he's ready to return to society. So, they decide to check on that, asking him why he doesn't wait for his brother. The newest one arrives there. However, the protagonist says that he doesn't think the newcomer understands the situation, stating that he isn't there to receive his permission. And Dr. Ree asks if that's really the case, and affirms that it is. Okay, but he tells him that there's a condition, and the boy finds what he's saying strange. And with that, he actually manages to leave the hospital, saying that he won't forget that favor, and the doctor says that they should keep in touch. Then, he speaks with the driver, mentioning that the boy hasn't fully recovered yet, asking him to make sure the boy arrives safely home. He replies that everything is fine, telling the doctor not to worry about it. As the boy departs, the nurse speaks with the doctor, saying that he paid for the hospital expenses, brought completely. And at that moment, the girl wonders what is happening, thinking it has to be a dream. But as he runs away without looking where he's going, the truck appears from the side, clothes, and even paid for the taxi, questioning why the doctor did all of that for him, explaining that F-rank returnees are basically abandoned by the central headquarters, not to mention that he doesn't. He would stop calling him bald, but the doctor thinks he wants to keep hearing that guy's story. The nurse asks if he wants to continue listening to it. It's ridiculous. And then he asks her to please fix that doorknob as soon as possible. She makes a note about the doorknob, saying that it's fine, and that she's going to call someone. But when she looks at the doorknob, she questions how it got that way. And in fact, it was when Prota opened the door forcefully, damaging it, and the doctor sits down, thinking that this is the second time the handle has been broken, and it's been a while since he last smelled an irregular. While Prota is inside the taxi, he hears the breaking news reporting that in an open field, Unprotected in Gangwon-do province, near the city of Hongcheon. Monsters appeared due to a miscalculation in the timing of a portal break, and they show those monsters in the news report. And it is said that, in response, the Minister of National Defense dispatched the Air Force in an emergency operation, declaring the situation resolved after only 50 minutes. However, the military suffered significant losses. 2 tanks were destroyed, and a total of 12 soldiers and awakened individuals died. They will continue to release details about the situation as they receive more information. They also report that a brutal fight between the S-rank global superheroes of the SPF Championship will take place, featuring the 34th ranked in the world, the Russian My Hell. Rorvas is participating, and the driver is excited about it. So, Proto observes the two, intending to praise them. However, he ends up noticing that, indeed, as the doctor said, the world has changed significantly. Of him, ready to take him to a sekai. Just centimeters before being hit, the boy closes his eyes, but when he opens them, he sees that he wasn't hit. Instead, he begins to be abducted and completely disintegrates, and has become a completely different place since that great disaster. And then, he learns about the mercenaries who the guild claims have the best reward distribution in the region. The guild in the story and the Sheila Guild are recruiting, and the driver says that if he were an awakened, he would quit his crappy job and get rich hunting in the fields. At that point, Ro asks if it is a hunting territory, but then he notices that the boy really doesn't know anything, saying that he must have hit his head pretty hard, and asks if he really isn't in the know. So the boy tells him to stop beating around the bush and just say it, and the driver wonders if he should even be talking to him. However, being silent is quite annoying to him, and he says that 10 years ago, not only in Korea, but all over the world, a gate to another world was opened. He calls this day the Great Day of Disaster, and it was the first dimensional convergence, when his world connected with several other worlds, and they were invaded by monsters from these worlds. And he remembers that day well, because on that day they lost 10% of the world's population. The military at that time was not enough to stop the monsters that were appearing everywhere, and even bombs were ineffective against them. So, in areas where the military presence was weak, mercenaries had to be dispatched, and people who had disappeared during the Great Disaster, or awakened individuals as they are known, were granted mercenary licenses and permission to hunt monsters. And these people formed guilds and began to make a lot of money hunting in the fields or dungeons, and they all went after the monsters that were worth a great deal of money. Then the protagonist inquires about this mercenary license, asking how one obtains it. Then he asks why the boy is so serious about it, laughing, and saying that it's difficult for an ordinary person, explaining, and after that, the same ray of light strikes somewhere else, leaving the boy there. When he opens his eye, he wonders where he is, because he's sure he just got hit by a truck. That first he needs to awaken his powers. Then he just needs to pass the mercenary test at the Awakened Management Center. And the protagonist once again thinks that this sounds complicated, and so the driver takes him to a really bad part of town, drops him off, and tells him they've arrived, asking if he sees the 2-story house with red bricks, and confirming that's the address that they gave him. As the protagonist leaves, he simply thanks the driver, who replies that he hopes he has fun with his younger brother. Once outside, he heads to the house. Then, a little old lady who is cleaning the window asks him who he is, and he says he's there because of Joao R, which she finds odd. The boy also finds the way she's looking at him strange. She then simply curses at the boy, saying that he's still in diapers but is talking to an adult like that, and she doesn't like it. He finds it strange, and she says there's no one there with that name, telling the boy to get out of there, acting all ignorant. The protagonist then questions if he's at the right place. Inside, the old lady starts saying that the idiots sent people to bother the new one, and another boy asks his grandmother if the scary man is back. Hearing that voice, the protagonist realizes it's the person he's been searching for, and goes to the window, looking inside. So, the boy who was inside, he asks his grandmother if his father is a debtor, but she says no and tells him to eat quickly. Then the protagonist goes to the mailbox, takes out one of the bills, and notices that one of them is from Joando, wondering if he is a debtor. He thinks that in the jungle it's the law of the strongest. But the law on Earth is very complicated, because if power is what simplifies the complicated, in a civilized society, money is power, and he rolls up his sleeves, determined to make that money. Initially, he goes to the awakened department, but after registering, he's deemed incompatible. Truck. And when he opens his eyes and looks up, he sees a moon, 2 in fact, and several flying monsters that look like griffins, and he wonders what the hell is going on, noticing that he is in the middle of, and the receptionist tells him that his application for mercenary protection has been denied, because he doesn't meet the necessary requirements. But the girl asks how that can be, saying that I'm going to awaken as a rank. But she says that while he's classified in that rank, he's still 4 points below what's required. And he asks how that's possible, explaining that he crossed a portal 2 weeks ago to get there. She starts laughing, saying that ordinary people die, their bodies ripped in half, if they try to cross a portal. But he insists that he definitely felt that kind of pain. So, she asks if he's the Hulk or something, telling him to please leave his delusions at home, and says that, in any case, he can go to awaken school or earn points in a field, asking him to come back when he actually awakens. The protagonist leaves, feeling confused, but then he spots a goblin field in Suwon and heads towards it. Inside the taxi, he asks how far those walls extend. The driver replies that they surround Seoul and that he can see them on a map app. He asks about the app, since he doesn't know what it is, and the driver asks if he doesn't have downloaded, explaining that his field is divided into 12 areas with hundreds of gates allowing him to move between them, and there are also dozens of external gates that lead to other fields. Frodo realizes he needs to buy a cell phone right away. Following this, the driver takes him to the So-1 field, gate 27. He thanks the driver and gets out of the car, arriving at the entrance, and he wonders if a hunting ground awaits him on the other side of the gate and proceeds forward. Upon arriving in front of the soldiers, they inquire about his purpose, and he states that he wants to hunt, which they find odd, and they ask him to show his mercenary license, but the boy replies that he doesn't have one. The soldier then explains that ordinary civilians are prohibited from entering the field. However, vegetation, and when he gets up, he sees enormous trees surrounding him. Observing everything around him, he was horrified because, in front of him, he saw a huge bear fighting against several wolves. Out of nowhere, an emergency begins. An alarm sounds, alerting the three of them, and one of the soldiers inside orders the exit to be closed immediately, but they fear it's too late. Just then, a truck comes. From inside, the gate bursts open, with a soldier being attacked by a monster emerging from within, and the out-of-control car crashes into the barrier. All the soldiers outside immediately begin requesting the emergency squad. Then, they form a perimeter around the car, and a blood-soaked monster emerges from inside, after having killed the man who was trying to escape. Location. At that moment, the soldiers open fire on the monster and, with only a few shots, manage to kill the creature. Approaching the scene, they declare the situation resolved, stating that the monster that came through the portal has been killed. Then, one of them calls Sergeant Park, asking where that guy went, and they wonder if it's the crazy taxi driver, asking if he got out. Then they start laughing, joking that he must have run away, betting that he pissed himself out of sheer terror. But the protagonist is already inside Portal 27, noticing that it's a field, and he says that he can feel that sound, that odor that permeates the area, saying, who will also have to buy a car. With that, he jumps to the highest point he can find, wondering, with the exception of Seoul, if all the cities have ended up like this. Thinking this can't be real, because the world has turned into a damn apocalypse, and when night falls, he recognizes the familiar darkness, reminiscent of his nights in the jungle. From up above, he throws himself down and thinks it's time to get his pants. As soon as he lands, he begins to feel his body becoming a little heavy and uses his heightened senses to see where to go. He sets off, running at an absurd speed, kicking up dust and climbing an entire building in a single bound. But he feels discomfort as he climbs, though he manages to reach the roof, and, both red and gray, this horrifies the boy. Meanwhile, in the real world, a doctor was talking to him, recapping the entire story the boy had told him. He wonders if this is a side effect of his return, as he feels weaker, and while standing in the moonlight, he uses his senses and sees some monsters watching from over there. Wondering why he doesn't just start there and run towards the monsters, realizing there really is something in that darkness. And then, once again, he sees a gray wolf being attacked, surrounded by several of those goblins. While the monsters are drooling, eager to kill the wolf, the protagonist arrives and asks the wolf if it wants his help, and the wolf looks him straight in the eyes as the goblins charge forward, and the boy smiles, declaring that those guys are his prey, killing the first one with a single punch, completely exploding the monster's head. Then the system begins to search for his class, and he receives numerous notifications. Many of those notifications are errors. He wonders what the thing in front of him is, because his system is bugged. So much. So, with all those errors appearing before him, he starts asking for that thing to disappear, but the goblins surround him and try to attack. However, the boy defeats them all, while they're still there, killing each of them with a single punch and realizing who they're up against. One of those goblins tries to run away, but the protagonist chases after him, grabbing the protection monster's head and slamming it back down, killing it solely from the impact of the fall. And then the system mentions that error when transferring the druid, but it still fails to reset the stats, and the error in the must system persists. Consequently, the class skills are also erased, and a critical error occurs. The protagonist questions what went wrong, but then realizes he understands, mentioning that it was about 100 years ago, when his constitution kept increasing. He explains that after his body was trained to its absolute limit, he barely received any more status, increase notifications, and he notices that this, saying that when he woke up, he was on a planet with 2 moons and a forest full of bizarre beasts. A bear and a malkatech were fighting. Suddenly, they headed towards the boy and the protagonist. Window even exists on Earth and concludes that this system error is the reason why these abilities weakened after he arrived there. Following this, his authority is obtained, and the store of achievements are unlocked. Then he says he's never seen this message before, wondering if this is what it means to awaken. And when he opens the store, he only has 7 points, and 1 point buys a water, while another item costs 2 points. He wonders what he can buy with 7 points and buys both, managing to get both a candy and a bottle of water. However, when he looks to the side, he sees that bloody wolf and a cub nearby, and goes to that monster and notices that she is dying, wondering if they used poison, and then she takes her last breath, trying to talk to him in some way. He even seems to understand her barking, asking if she is talking about her baby, and says that he never said he was going to take care of it, telling her not to kick the baby bucket yet. So, he says that even if the baby looks at him like that, he won't be able to do much, but he ends up feeling sorry for the cub, wondering if this is also fate. So, he grabs that candy and tells the little creature to eat it, and the creature ends up eating it. The protagonist goes back to the goblins, mentioning that there are several of them, 7 in total, and thinks that he really needs to get a car. And in the morning, as the sun rises, he buries his mother, keeps an eye on the cub, and wonders if he should leave now. At the entrance to Station 27, some cars enter the area, and the soldier instructs them to maintain the defined distance between the vehicles, and to not forget to go to the decontamination room before picking up their payment. So, a guy in a car asks what's causing the delay and tells them to hurry up, but a truck driver questions what that thing is back there, and everyone gets scared. At that moment, the soldier looks, confirms this. Then, the doctor asks how he managed to return alive from such a place, and the boy doesn't have much to say, only remembering how those wolves killed. Back and sees the protagonist coming with several dead goblins tied to his back, along with the cub, and he wonders, what the hell is that? Well, that's a pretty idiotic way to bring them in. They also wonder if the boy killed them all alone, and the soldier recognizes him from the previous day. So, he takes all the goblins to the payment center, and she gives him 17,500 for the 7 goblins he caught, and 3,000 for the blood crystals, plus 10,000 for decontamination and the care of the cub. That totals 30,500 for him. He questions about these blood crystals. He explains that they extract them from inside the goblin's chest, showing him a jewel, and says that the prices vary according to the amount of energy stored inside the blood crystal, and at least at that size, he can get 1,000 per crystal. And since he doesn't have a registered account, they're going to pay him in cash, and he seems to be very skilled and should register as a mercenary soon, as it will make things easier. And, seeing how easily he obtained that money, he thinks that this way he can start to hunt in dungeons. After registering as a mercenary, making money will only be a matter of time. Meanwhile, he and his brother go to a small store, and the shopkeeper says, Park has been asking about him for a while now, wondering how he's been doing. He mentions that he recently started working as a truck driver. Then, the shopkeeper says he knows that he's been having money problems, and says he's glad that he got the job. The conversation between the two goes well, but as soon as he returns to the truck, the protagonist heads close to Joao Ra's house, in a taxi. And when Joao Ra gets out of the truck, about to enter his house, someone calls out to him. When he turns around, he gets punched and is thrown to the ground. That Jota says it's been a while, with tons of crazy beasts, and in that hostile environment, you have to survive for 1,000 years. I can't even imagine it, but our protagonist is living it, and now that he's back in Seoul, back in that bear, taking it down, and managing to obtain its food, they began to eat the monster's flesh while he hid. However, in the meantime, a small wolf cub, and says he was worried that Joao Ra had abandoned his son and run away. After being beaten and covered in blood, he continues to be beaten on the ground, and is forced to kneel in front of Jota. He says that he looks much better than the last time he saw him, while still hitting and cursing at him, asking if he knows how many times he had to go there. So, Jun-woo apologizes. He apologizes, saying that he was working in the field, and says that this is the month's payment plus interest, totaling 12,000, asking him to forgive him. So, the idiot counts the money right in front of him, talking about the monthly fee of 8,000 and the accumulated interest, which is 6,000, plus the 4 days of home visit fees, and the cleaning fee, saying that there was only a little bit left. And at that moment, Jun-woo starts to tremble, apologizing while crying, saying that he will get what is missing, no matter what it takes, in 3 days. But the idiot keeps hitting him, asking if he knows, quote, how much 3 days of interest is, and he says he's aware, but then he says if he lies again, he'll beat him. But the protagonist arrives, shouting Jun-woo, along with the puppy. So, the idiot asks, who is that over there? And Jun-woo is surprised to see his brother, who is completely irritated seeing the situation he's in. And seeing his brother in that situation, he simply approaches him, climbing up and going to Jun, kneeling down next to the boy and asking if that is his brother. He is surprised to see his older brother looking the same way he was at that time, and, back in the past, he was still getting beaten up, this time by bullies at school who were surrounding him, while the boy was taking a beating, and in the midst of this, his brother passed by, seeing him, in a situation similar to the one he is in at present. Then, while the boy was taking out the trash, Jun shouted to his brother, asking him to help while he was being beaten, and Prota simply appeared right behind him. He was scared to death when he saw the baby of one of those creatures right next to him, and with that, the boy did what any sensible person would do. He ran as fast as he could, throwing the bags in and ignoring his brother's screams for help. And all the bullies laughed at him because he still had the courage to ask for help. And the bullies started to make fun, while the boy grew annoyed with his brother for simply ignoring him. Jun-woo, at the time, felt that his brother hadn't been very helpful in his life, until they started receiving news of unknown explosions in Seoul and Mapogo, which are spreading throughout the entire country, as well as the red spheres that appeared alongside the explosions. And there were several reports of unidentified creatures. At that moment, Jun-woo goes to answer the door where someone is calling for him. The boy rushes over, asking if it's his mother, but it's actually his uncle and aunt, and they are happy that the boy is home, mentioning that they were unable to contact his parents, asking where Sorrow is, and saying that they need to leave immediately, telling him to pack his suitcases. But, as he's talking to his aunt and uncle, who are still outside, an explosion occurs, throwing the boy backward, taking his aunt and uncle with him, and a monster appears right then and there. The boy is surprised to see those figures, and one of them puts his eye right up to the apartment door, scaring him before simply leaving. And Jun-woo is terrified. He says that, dead or alive, he didn't care what had happened to his brother, and that was the extent of his concern. Sorrow tells Jun-woo that he looks like he has grown since the last time he saw him, but then he starts saying that he thought his brother was dead. However, during this emotional reunion, Ajota questions what craziness they are talking about and if he is hallucinating, because he was hit too hard on the head, asking if that was his older brother. However, the protagonist simply grabs Ajota's hair, not wanting to talk much, and throws him. From there, fleeing from everything he could. He says that in order to survive, he ran as hard as he could, and as he ran, his constitution stat increased. He was surprised by this notification, and with back unceremoniously. And Jun-woo is surprised by what his brother just did, because he, with only one hand, threw that guy extremely far, and his two subordinates are left wondering how that guy did that to his boss. And the protagonist just asked Joao Ross if he was hurt, and he says yes, then he says no, and he doesn't even really know how he is. Then, one of the subordinates tries to hit the protagonist, asking if he wants to die, and kicking him. However, the protagonist doesn't even bother to defend himself, letting the guy's shin hit his head, and with that, the guy's leg breaks apart completely, just like Anderson Silva's. He falls down screaming in pain with his leg broken. So, the last one left is scared to death, because there's no way he's an awakened one. And then, the protagonist tells him to come to him, pointing as if he were calling a puppy. But he says he didn't hurt Jun-woo, saying that the protagonist has to believe him, as he even told those guys to leave him alone. But the protagonist tells him to go and get his money, which is on the floor. He's even scared, but the protagonist tells him to take the money and get out of there. And he actually goes to take the money and he thanks him on his knees, while Joao doesn't understand anything that is happening. And, returning to Jun-woo's house, the old woman is surprised to see the protagonist there and doesn't understand what's going on. So, she asks if he's sure that Brat is his older brother, and Jun-woo says he's absolutely sure he's his older brother. Yes. So, he tells the old woman that he brought meat, and she is surprised, saying that he should have told her that he was family, and tells them to go quickly because the boy has fallen asleep, waiting for his father to come home. And, when they enter, a little wolf cub goes after the boy who is sleeping, and the protagonist asks if he is his son or his brother's son. He says yes. The child's name is Gu, and he says that Gu is his only treasure. After this unexpected surprise, he ended up tripping, rolling down the path, and falling into a pile of bushes from a considerable height. When he got up, he asked himself, "What?" And so, the protagonist asks, "Where's the child's mother?" He says that she left to live her own life, and that it's his fault for not being able to provide enough for his family, and the protagonist is observing the situation. When his brother is feeling down, he invites him out for drinks and a chat. They head to a small bar, and John R. says that after he disappeared, he thought he was dead all this time. But the fact that he came back alive without aging, and on top of that, became one of the awakened, is unbelievable. Then, the protagonist cuts to the chase and asks how much he owes. He says it's around 220,000.01, but assures him that everything is fine, stating that he's sure he can handle his debts now that he has a job. But the protagonist asks what job he has, and he says he works at a logistics center where the salary is good, and not many people are willing to do the work, since transporting goods between the fast surviving cities has become extremely dangerous. The protagonist asks if the truck is his, and he replies that it isn't, explaining that it used to belong to Grandma's son, but she rents it to him, so he asks what her son does for a living. He mentions that he learned her son died during the Great Disaster, and assumes that's why she's taking care of the gungo, as if it were her own family. And she is a very dear person to both of them. And when the boy wakes up to a puppy licking him, he's surprised to see a puppy around, and ends up noticing that, outside, his father is drinking with a stranger, and Jo is surprised to see her son awake. The boy asks who that guy is. Then, Joao R. introduces him as the boy's uncle, and after letting the child playing with the dog, Joao R. says that it's good to see, mentioning that G always wanted to have a dog. However, the protagonist asks Joao R. what he thinks about them working together. He doesn't quite understand. Was that noise just now? Wondering if he was imagining things. But when he looked ahead, he noticed something different. A huge fruit. And since he is, well, he says he'll do all the work and just asks him to help with that truck. At that point, Joao R. asks what he is planning to do, and the protagonist gets straight to the point, saying he wants hunting monsters, a concept that frightens his brother. Sometime later, he returns to the Awakened Association, where the attendant is surprised and congratulates him on registering as an awakened. Today, he somehow managed to increase his stats in a single day, and he's surprised to find out he's an F rank. She explains that he can now use his identification to open an account and carry out banking operations, adding that the phone is a small gift for registering as an awakened, and hands it to the protagonist. She also mentions that he shouldn't forget to download the Awakened Central app, since mercenary test schedules and information about hunts will be available there. He thinks this is excellent, and she mentions that once he's gathered enough dimensional energy to become a ranker, he'll be qualified for pensions and other benefits, asking him to please continue to striving to protect humanity. She also asks if he knows how to open the status window, but Sungo doesn't seem to know. She explains that the interface has had some changes due to recent technical issues. Some changes. He opens the window, noticing everything and being surprised, wondering why some of his stats are so low, and thinking that's why he felt weaker, noticing that a lot of things are returning. Then, he takes the truck with his brother. He's surprised that his brother got a cell phone, saying that he thinks that he is officially an awakened now, congratulating him. Then, he tells the protagonist that he is already on his way to the location and will meet him as soon as he delivers the last batch. Dying of hunger, he wonders if it's edible. However, there are several ants all over the fruit, and, since there are insects eating it, he assumes that the thing isn't poisonous, saying that now that he has officially become an awakened, all that remains is the mercenary test, but he says that before that, they will pay off their debt. But Joao Rocha finds this strange. After all, he's still an F rank, and says he doesn't think he's ready to hunt monsters yet, adding that he'll feel bad if he ends up dead. But then, he notices that his brother simply hung up on him, right in front of him, wondering if he's really the same brother he's always known, because it's as if he's completely changed. I think 1,000 years would change anyone, let me tell you. And the protagonist thinks about the reward for monsters, since the Namangju gate seems to be closed. Meanwhile, at gate 137, some people are inside a car, and the three in the back seat are scared to death, and the driver asks what's happening, telling them to relax, and questioning why they're so afraid. After all, they are awakened ones, asking if they've forgotten that they can officially become raiders for the Chilla Guild if they manage to clear that dungeon. And the girl replies, no, saying that they will do their best. Better, but the guy next door thinks those damn incompetents are slowing him down, saying they're only doing it for the pension and wouldn't have even gotten this far without their connections. And he says he thinks this batch of recruits is just as bad as the last one. A military guy there calls for the next recruit, but notices that it's the protagonist standing in front of him. Then he asks if he's alone. The boy says yes, and he tells him to put his awakened card in the reader so he can access his information. He notices that he's an F-rank hunter and is surprised, asking if the boy knows that it's a rank with limitations, saying that he can't enter just any dungeon, but the boy says, I knew. While he is passing alone, the instructor in the passenger seat watches the boy get in, and the soldier asks his friend if he thinks he'll be okay, since he doesn't even have the proper equipment. So but while he's eating, he hears a noise coming from the thicket, and, once again, is scared to death. As soon as he peers through the leaves, he sees the eye of the instructor in the passenger seat watches the boy get in, and the soldier asks his friend if he thinks he'll be okay, since he doesn't even have the proper equipment. So, he tells him not to worry, because he's the guy who single-handedly took care of 7 goblins at gate 27. However, the instructor in the car keeps wondering who he thinks he is, questioning if he's going to the field like that, without any equipment or weapons, thinking he must be out of his mind. Just then, the soldier goes to the driver, apologizing for the delay, and explaining that they were having some technical problems, and wishing them good luck. Following this, the instructor tells Han Sandin to step on the gas, and says he's going to follow that guy. However, when he tries to follow him, the protagonist exits the tunnel and disappears, leaving everyone behind. They are surprised, as they were certain they were right behind him, and they wonder where he could have gone. However, the instructor is excited, because it seems like he's stumbled upon something very interesting. Meanwhile, the protagonist runs into the forest with everything he's got, practically flying, and he's surprised that this is the current state, feeling the strain on his body, becoming tired, and realizing that he has indeed become very weak. He acknowledges that he should resume training. However, he notices something in front of him and demands that whoever is watching him reveal themselves, asking if it's a sword fight, telling them to stop hiding if they want to die. He notices someone approaching from another direction, but he remains calm, excited, because a fight between civilized beings and non-beasts is an opportunity he cannot miss. So, when he arrives, he witnesses a man losing his arm, with the severed hand flying through the air, still clutching the sword. Then, he calmly tells the other man to come forward, and they begin to fight the one who severed the first arm, who asks who else he should bring down. Lizard watching him closely, scaring him half to death again. Just then, a gigantic creature leaps out of the water towards the boy, who is frozen in shock. But before that enormous monster, for now, the protagonist is quite surprised to see the fight unfolding, with 3 individuals surrounded by many others. Then, they ask if the attackers don't know who they are, but one of the assassins doesn't. He doesn't even care, since his arm is gone, and the protagonist notices that it looks like it will take all day for them to even get started. He takes it easy until then, while the boss of those brown hooded guys exits from his car, wondering why it's taking them so long to deal with those little flies. They're surprised to see the guy with the mohawk, and they announce that there are 3 of them, ordering them around to hurry up, and then realize that the guy is Choi Go, who has a bounty of 200,000 on his head. Hearing this, the protagonist becomes very interested in that reward. And one of those 3, who were surrounded, is scared to death because he's a C-rank looter, and they try to escape. Meanwhile, Choi's subordinates ask how they dare speak about their boss like that, because everyone is dead now, and Tui confirms that's right, that his head is worth 200,000, telling them to go and get it if they can. The 3 of them are terrified, wondering why of all. Of course, here are the improved translations. People, it had to be Shoha. At that moment, their leader asks if Sassy will let them go later. Guess what? He questions where the fun would be in that, and goes after them. That leader asks him to wait, saying that he doesn't have to do this because he will give him everything. But the protagonist falls from above, landing between the 2 of them, attracting everyone's attention. And Choi stops immediately to see what's happening, along with everyone else who wonders who this is. The protagonist then comes face to face with Choi, ready to attack. Could reach him. A frog appears and bites the snake with incredibly strong teeth, instantly killing it, and drags it down into the water. The protagonist remains standing as he asks what hole the boy crawled out of, and before starting the fight, he asks if he really said his head is worth 200,000, and Choi confirms, questioning who the boy is. Wants to die. At that, Choi starts laughing, saying that the boy doesn't seem to be from Central, but the protagonist doesn't even understand what he's talking about, and Choi says it would have been better for him if he had just taken care of his own life. And Choi activates an ocular power, looking directly into Soro's eyes, causing him to walk backwards and freeze in place. He wonders what's wrong with his body, and then Choi says that he looked into his eyes for more than 5 seconds, and the protagonist questions what he is seeing. And Choi says that this means he can't move anymore, and the protagonist finally understands what happened to his body, and Choi asks what they are doing, ordering his subordinates to crush that idiot. But as they move in, the protagonist simply moves and lands a punch in Choi's face, surprising everyone, including Choi himself, because he moved. He questions what is happening, but the protagonist gets super angry and also moves his other arm, invoking his aura, so he asks if it's magic, saying it's interesting, and prepares to smash Choi's face with his next punch. And before he can land the hit on Choi, he shouts, launching his binding magic at the protagonist, stopping his movements. He says, as expected, the boy is just a small fly, picking up his dagger, bending down and preparing to pierce him, saying that, even so, he should have thought twice. However, the protagonist lands a knee strike right in his nose, breaking it and causing blood to flow. And then, he asks if he doesn't have another trick up his sleeve. So, Choi tries to bind the protagonist, but this time the punch connects, and not just one, but several others to the abdomen, and the force of the punch sends him flying against a window, crashing into the store. Not. Same spot, unmoving, witnessing all that horror unfold right before his eyes. He thinks that this place is completely insane, and due to the shock, he faints right then and there, through the door, and the boy starts saying that he's kind of boring, while the other three are thinking that, to deal with Choi so easily, who the hell could that kid be? And when they turn around, subordinates are trying to surround him. He asks if they want to vote as well, but they say no, stating that they would never do such a thing. And then he asks everyone to come closer, inquiring if someone has a rope, and the three of them say that they do. Then he asks what the rewards are for those guys, but none of them there are worth anything, explaining that they only worked for Shogosek because they were threatened by him. Turning over Shogosek will be enough to piss off Hike and Choi, as he listens to all his subordinates, absolving themselves of blame, and after taking quite a beating, he ends up cursing all the guys tied up with their faces on the floor. He says that they are betraying him after using him for all this time, calling them traitors. The door is surprised that he has already woken up and all those guys tell him to shut his mouth, telling him to go to the slammer. But Soro wonders if he won't gain anything by getting rid of those guys, and they confirm that's exactly right, saying that they are just a bunch of nobodies and small-time crooks. But the three who were threatened say, that's a lie, claiming they are all hardened criminals and they are sure that one of them has a bounty, and suggest that, would it be better to hand them all over? And Prota asks if it's true, while they deny it, saying they're just vagrants and insignificant. But at that moment, The speaks with the crazy strong guy, wondering if the city's laws don't make him feel restricted. He finds this talk strange, and To says that that place is the true land of freedom, and that he will do everything in his power to make him live like a king, if he allows it. But Prota goes up to him and kicks him in the face, telling him to keep quiet, leaving the imprint of his shoe sole tattooed on Choi's cheek. Korea. He's returned incredibly powerful. I'm sure you're going to want part 2 of this story as much as I do. So, it's simple. Comment down below, requesting the next part, and he wonders if, in fact, maybe he's the one who's gone insane. The rain eventually wakes him up, and after waking up, he starts to adapt to the environment, already wearing primitive clothing and when he looks back, he asks if they are saying those guys have bounties on their heads. He says most of them do, since they used to be criminals. They soon think that the jig is up, and Prota? He asks if they don't have too much luggage to take, but the three in the back tell him he can use their car. At that, he's surprised they even have a car, saying it's time for everyone there to take a nap. He puts them to sleep as gently as possible, and then shoves everyone into the trunk of the car like it's a police wagon, and everyone is crammed in, while they calmly ride up front. And those three say they truly appreciate his help, asking how they could possibly repay the favor. But the protagonist tells them to relax, as he didn't do it to help them in any way whatsoever. But then, they say that, thanks to the protagonist, they managed to get out of there alive, declaring that he is their savior. And the protagonist thinks that if they want to think of it that way, that's fine. But he remembers to ask them what their special abilities are. And one of them says that he's a swordsman, tracker, and investigator. And then, asks if he has 3 skills, and the leader confirms, explaining that the sword's ability has awakened, and that he learned to track and investigate through skill books, so he stays. Is surprised that you can learn spells through books. Lee is very surprised because that guy doesn't know what a skill book is, and he thinks about what Sun told him, saying that it's better to learn 1 or 2 magical combat skills, as they will probably be useful in the future, until he notices something, spotting the gate in front of him, and asks if that thing there is a portal. At that, the leader is even more surprised, saying that it's a level 1 gate, the lowest level, and that they were planning to go there. Prota thinks it's a shame because honing his jungle survival skills, and that marked Ilhado's 67th day stranded there. He mentions that the pack pursuing him still hadn't given up, and he feared he could go there if he had a mercenary license. The other guy is even more surprised, asking if he doesn't have a license yet, and Prota confirms that he doesn't. The kid is left in a bind with this situation because when a portal breaks, the military first subdues the area, and any monsters found in the fields are just small fry that somehow survived the military attack. And the experience one can get in those low-level camps, where level 1 dungeons are opened, is low rank. And in order to surpass this level, you need to hunt stronger monsters and steal their dimensional energy. In other words, you have to go into some level 2 dungeons. And he wonders then how in the possible of hell that newbie who didn't even go to a level 1 dungeon managed to defeat a C ranker like Choi, and he smiled. Noticing his surprise, he asks what's wrong. He apologizes, asking if he can know the protagonist's rank. He says it's F, to everyone's biggest surprise. He almost crashes the car, and they ask him to be careful. And the protagonist then questions what favor I wanted to ask him something, but he couldn't even say anything. Meanwhile, that instructor returns from the dungeon he went into with his students, and they all come back injured, almost dead, and in this situation, one of them needs to be taken away quickly because his arm was torn off, and they start asking for a doctor. But the instructor, seeing that, doesn't like the outcome at all, asking if nowadays they are just handing out mercenary licenses to anyone, saying that the first thing he's going to do when he returns to the guild is kick the ass of whoever chose those idiots. But then the driver asks him to calm down, asking the captain not to be so harsh, telling him not to be so hard on the newcomers, saying that he knows the state of the guild in the last few days. But then he gets even more irritated, could catch him at any moment. Moreover, that forest held dangers beyond just the wolves, and he needed to find a safer location. After a year of being stranded there, he discovered bananas, because those who have rich parents can easily become awakened, since monsters are imprisoned, and all they have to do is go there and deliver the final blow to the monsters. And after that, they're moners. Parents hire mercenaries to carry them through dungeons, and suddenly they're ready to join the guild and go on quests, even though they're still idiots, since they are the guild members are the ones who suffer for accepting those idiots. He thinks society is rotten, and he can't even deal with people who are capable and willing to use their connections. But in this, his friend tells him to calm down, wondering why he doesn't relax and have a drink. However, as they're leaving that hunting ground, they wonder what all the commotion is about. A Nivion hill is about to disappear. They question what happened there. He goes to Captain J, who tells him that what occurred is something very big. He says that someone just delivered 10 looters to them, which surprises them. They mention that among those captured was a C rank, the infamous Sho Chike, and surely he's heard of him and is surprised that they captured that guy, since someone of high rank must have visited the fields today. But they say no, and that it was a rookie, an S rank, who doesn't even have a mercenary license, managed to capture that guy. They ask if they can believe it. Then the captain asks how he did it. But the military man says he doesn't know the details. However, according to witnesses, Hank F simply beat Shoy, and Hanker F left Shoy completely destroyed, and he not only practically gave him plastic surgery on his nose, but also broke 4 of his ribs and destroyed half of his face. He is surprised, remembering the protagonist who entered there with bare hands, and asks, almost as big as himself, grabbing one to eat, feeling calmer, stronger, and more experienced in that jungle life. A banana that size would certainly provide food for about 3 or 4 days, where that Hanker F went. Then he says that they saw him heading towards the portals, and Ennis, the captain, runs back into the portal, leaving his friend wondering where he is going, and he says that he has to see it with his own eyes. because if he goes for real, then he might be able to gain something valuable from that story. And moments before, the captain went to the operator, asking him if the guy who captured Choi Gok had just entered the portal, and inquiring which portal he used. Meanwhile, Prota has just entered the portal, now a little better equipped, and starts to notice that it didn't hurt at all, remarking that his clothes seem to be fine as well. And at that moment, the leader of that squad explains that items that do not possess dimensional energy cannot pass through the portals. But, as he just witnessed, those clothes pass through the portal easily, since they are made from materials found in dungeons. And, although they don't appear to be of much value, those clothes actually cost $10,000. And he is surprised by this, but looking back, something else surprises him. He asks, "What is that?" And the guy I'm going to call him Helper, since I don't remember if he mentioned his name. He says that thing is called a portal, and he's going to take the portal to where they just entered. It's one of several doors that provide access to 38 dungeons. The door they just used leads them to dungeon number 24. At that moment, the door disintegrates as they pass through, and the portal wonders if it disappeared. He says that it will reappear when they complete the dungeon, but then he asks what he means by complete, questioning if they have to kill all the monsters. The helper says that they only have to kill the strongest one. Prota thanks him, asking him to wait there, as he'll finish quickly. But then he questions what he means by wait there, and Prota disappears from in front of him, leaving, and he says that somehow he survived. Or, to be more precise, perhaps he had adapted. A wolf cub persistently insisted on approaching him, and he became so, as if he were Superman breaking through the ground. He questions who that guy is, since maybe he's the guy from the rumors, but more importantly, with that level of power, he can greatly daughter. Well, he needs to beat the time record to clear that level 1 dungeon. However, he's scared because he doesn't even have a tracking ability. What if he can't find the port location within the time limit? He'll be stuck. And then, the assistant runs away, saying that if they get stuck there, they might end up disappearing along with the portal. But, at first, the door controller speaks with the captain, telling him that door 24 just closed the door that Prota had entered. He's irritated by this situation. Meanwhile, Prota is running after the goblins. As soon as he finds the first one, he starts the slaughter. They can't even figure out what's happening because Prota kills them so quickly that they can see where the attacks are coming from. He notices that they are carrying some pretty decent stuff, so he takes some weapons and opens up the monsters' bodies, stealing the stones that they have inside. However, he's annoyed that he only obtained 1 blood crystal after killing 3 of them, but he feels calmer because he has already gained a lot from the reward and thinks that what matters now it's time to level up. So he goes around killing everyone there. When the helper arrives, he is surprised, noticing that he has killed a lot, and uses the tracker, noticing that he is looking in the direction directly ahead, in front of him. Meanwhile, Prota is at level 1 of the Druid class with 102 achievement points, and he notices that he can buy 2 skills with 102 points, Tame Beast and Summon Spirit of the Tree. So he thinks he'll go with that one first, and the monsters that come after him end up dying before they even fall. And he is not satisfied with killing with just 1 blow, giving several hits around and accustomed to the cub that he missed it when it wasn't around. But while he was eating his banana, he felt drool dripping right onto his back. And when he looked, his achievement score goes to 545, and then a critical error occurs with a data conflict, and the additional synchronization is in process, and he gets irritated that this is happening again, questioning himself what additional synchronization is. And with that, he levels up to level 2 with 345 achievement points. As a result, all of his stats increase significantly. He notices that the increase is normal, so he now proceeds to buy the spirit skill with 100 points, and he immediately puts the skill into action, invoking the spirit of the tree, and a glow emerges from the middle of his chest. And from that glow, a little fairy appears. He notices that it was her. He says that when he first saw her in the jungle, he thought she was some kind of fancy firefly, ordering the tree spirit to go look for the missing goblins. And she actually shows him the way, and he notices that the tree spirit sends the memories it reads from the vegetation and trees to his head, but he thinks it's a little slow, wondering if it's because his level is too low. So, he opens the status window, navigates to the skills section, realizes that he can buy, search, and track, and says that he will use the remaining points to buy that skill, and uses it by touching the ground and invoking search. With this, he figures he now has a reference point and can track information from the goblins that are already dead. But when he looks to the side, he notices that it's not just a mere goblin and quickly gets excited, rushing towards it. and when he gets there, he's startled to see that the monster is on top of the helper, and he stops, somewhat unsure of what to do, asking what the helper is doing. He's surprised that the protagonist came. Then he asks if he didn't say he was going to hunt alone, and he says that he's actually the one being hunted, and the protagonist questions if that's really the case. So the helper simply asks for help by shouting, and the protagonist goes after that thing, but the monster manages to. Looking up, he noticed yet another monster threatening his life. A huge gorilla was charging at him, rushing towards the boy, ready to kill him, but he put its shield in front, defending itself against his attack, and thus gets up, attacking the protagonist again, but he just delivers a knee strike and smashes the monster against the stone, who is behind him and attacks again, while the monster, now covered in blood, plunges its dagger into his chest, causing him to level up once more, acquiring 120 achievement points. Then, the assistant is once again surprised by the protagonist's strength, and after he defeats that monster, he asks the assistant if the door should have opened, to which he replies yes, which must have opened, and the two of them pass through, returning to the officer's area. There, they ask if that's the guy who captured Shoika. They confirm that it is, and that he is the one Captain Kang was looking for. He remembers that Captain Kang requested they be contacted if he returned, and as a result, they inquire about the problem, as the guy inside is very surprised and questions whether that guy's completion time is correct, because that is completely unbelievable. Then, the assistant says he needs to return to his teammates and that he will contact the protagonist later. He says it's fine, mentioning he did well and that he'll leave the clothes in storage. After changing and leaving, he thinks he's famous, but as he steps out and looks ahead, he sees the captain. He's standing right in front of him and immediately asks if he's Parkoro. The protagonist asks who he is, and the man replies, Mirok, captain of the 27th combat team of the Sheila Guild. Then, he asks if the boy can spare a few minutes of his time, and begins talking to the protagonist while he eats. The protagonist asks about this Sheila Guild, and Minok gets straight to the point, asking him to join his guild, saying that he will provide the best environment to help him grow. However, the protagonist refuses the offer, saying he isn't interested, and showing that he doesn't manage to get out of the way of that attack, causing the gorilla to fall along with the branch, hanging from a nearby vine, which made the monster fall. So he tells the gorilla to have better luck next time, calmly avoiding that attack. Any of that, asking what the man's intention is, questioning how he can refuse an offer to join his guild without a second thought, and asks if it's some kind of ploy to increase his value. From him, he says that if he's already associated with another guild, they can make an official offer, but Prota says he isn't in a guild. Then Miri says they can talk in a room. They can provide a place, but he needs to know that there's practically no difference in strength between the top guilds. They promise to provide treatment that beats any offer he might receive, but Prota slams the coffee he was drinking, saying he doesn't like being under someone else's command, and Minok is scared by what the boy just said. And with that, he returns to Jun's house. Jun, thinking that, from the looks of it, they haven't returned yet, and in order to wait for them, he goes to the rooftop, saying that maybe they are spending some good quality time as father and son, and the old lady, she arrives there with clothes piled on her head, asking why young people nowadays like to waste their time so much, and Prota doesn't understand very well, saying that grandma should go lie down, also saying the weather is perfect for a nap. However, she asks if he can't see that she went to hang up the clothes, so he gets up to help her, and she tells him that he has to make sure to stretch the clothes well. Then, she asks if he's really Joe's older brother, and when he confirms, she says it's a nice surprise, teasing him and saying that Benjamin Button is in her home, but he insists it's real and true. He says it's quite the opposite, but the old woman still doesn't believe him, and he says it's all right. He adds that with all those strangers popping up, out of nowhere, and causing havoc, she thinks that looking younger isn't something that surprises her anymore, and mentions she heard that he hasn't seen his brother in 10 years. She tells him to make sure. As the gorilla fell below, the little cub was unable to react in time, and the monster fell on top of him, throwing him to the side and hurting him, to take care not to break his family's heart. The protagonist takes this into consideration, saying that he won't die that easily, and she calls him an idiot, saying that those who talk like him, they are always the first to leave. But then, Junron arrives with his son, asking if grandma is on the terrace, and she confirms that she is. He goes to meet his father-in-law, and the two of them remain there. They are surprised, but then, as he sits down, the protagonist throws the envelope into Jun's hand, and Jun asks what it is. The protagonist replies that it's 250,000, and tells him to use it to resolve his debt. And Jun-ra is surprised, noticing that he earned all that money himself. He says he will pay off his debt so they can have dinner together, and Jun-woo wonders how he can repay this favor. But the protagonist tells him not to get all sentimental and to just take the money and go. But then, before leaving, he asks Jun-woo if he has enough money to buy food and drinks on the way back. Jun-woo says he does, and that he will return before his brother notices, telling him to take care of Gongor. Initially, he stays there with the child, viewing his status window. Then, with a puppy nearby, it's said that it's following him, asking him to name the target. He wonders what he should call the little guy for the boy. He says it's Bake-go, saying that's what he wants to call him, and the protagonist names him, saying that from now on, he will be Bake-go. Then his information appears, showing him to be level 1, with a combat power of 3, and the protagonist tells him to get the ball, and the puppy actually goes. He continues playing with the child on the terrace, but then it starts to get dark, and the boy thinks that he's hungry, wondering why his father hasn't returned yet, and the protagonist sees his little truck stopping and says he thinks he's arrived, calling the boy over so he can go and see his father. He runs, and Silver noticed this, because when the gorilla got up, he was full of hatred, wanting to attack the first thing he saw in front of him. And the little cub, injured, with a to the front, all excited, but when Joao gets out of the truck, he is all mangled and bloody, and falls near Gungo, right in front of the child, and the protagonist realizes he messed up badly, leaving him alone. Then, he asks what happened to June. Meanwhile, with the mobsters, they are all calm after giving Jungo a beating, and their leader asks how are the bets on SPFC for that week. The subordinate says, the odds are 1-2 for John Harvey, and 7 to Dan, or something like that, and they keep talking about it. And the leader asks if there's any news from Horizon, since the last time they went to Bangda Wong, they lost a lot of money. But, while they are calmly talking, someone knocks on the door with the delicacy of a bear. They get scared, wondering what all that noise is, and so, the leader tells them to go check, but as soon as they get up, the door opens, and someone from outside falls in, and the guy is already covered in blood, telling his boss that he's screwed, but then the protagonist grabs his head, pulling him out like, if this were a horror movie, he'd vanish into that darkness, and everyone inside would be scared to death, wondering what the hell was going on. Then, the baldest and most arrogant guy of all steps forward to see what's happening, but then, the guy who was pulled outside comes flying back, crashing into them. So, they pull out their knives, declaring that whoever is invading is dead, saying he can come, and the protagonist actually prepares to enter the room. Who would have thought, right, protagonist, that letting your brother go pay the debt alone would end badly, huh? Who knew that things would go south after you beat one of them up? And when the protagonist is inside the room, he grabs the door with all his might, ripping it from its hinges, lifting it to the ceiling, and throwing it down on the guys. Also, leave a like so I know you enjoyed it, and so does YouTube. And without further ado, let's dive into this story that I'm going to continue narrating, because it's insane. At the beginning, we see our stick in his leg, couldn't escape, and tried to face the gorilla. And the gorilla apparently didn't want to take it easy just because he was a little cub. He went in to kill, attacking, knocking everyone aside. And one of them starts screaming as their lives are being cut short, and they're being hit by the flying debris. And they all suffer the protagonist's wrath, until some start falling out the window, and others end up under the boy's shoe. Then, their leader becomes scared to death as Prota approaches him, and even though he was shaking all over, the leader asks, "Who is that son of a bitch?" And another says that he appears to be an awakened one, and maybe he is, but Prota arrives, kicking the table and pinning them both against the wall. Then, they say that their legs are being crushed, still cursing the boy, seemingly not realizing the situation. Then, Prota stops pressing them, and climbs on top of the table, getting close to that guy who keeps asking who he is, but Soro just asks if he's John S. So, that crazy guy, still full of arrogance, confirms it's him, and goes back to asking who Prota is, and then, he just says that he is someone who wants to settle Park John R's debt. However, Khan, still full of arrogance, says that he must be completely crazy, questioning if he calls himself awakened after beating up hardworking, honest people, he shouldn't think he'll get away with it. But then he notices that the protagonist isn't paying much attention, but ends up receiving a slap that knocks a bunch of his teeth to the ground. A very well-delivered slap. But this slap doesn't just come from one side, as the protagonist repeats the same on the other, shaking his head back and forth. And forth. He says, that's right, questioning why he had to beat up the guy who just wanted to pay off his debt, and saying that all he had to do was take the money and let the guy go, because he crossed the line, beating him excessively, to the point where he's almost crying, but the protagonist continues the beating session, and the leader starts crying, begging him to. The puppy was off to the side as the gorilla beat him. However, at that moment, the protagonist decided to go and help the little cub, grabbing a stick and sticking it directly into the gorilla's eye, blinding him in one eye. With the leave him alive, but he has no intention of stopping, asking if he wants to settle the debt or be beaten to death. So the leader says he wants to settle it, he wants to resolve the debt, crying like a child. Then the protagonist decides to stop the beating, forcing everyone to kneel before him. They swear that, from that moment on, their client, Park Jun-ra, has no further obligations to them, and that all his debts were paid. However, the protagonist orders them to scream louder. They repeat their oath, stating that from that moment on, Jun-ra has no more debts or business with them, and the protagonist tells them that if he ever sees them again, they should consider themselves dead. So, they must be sure never to cross his path, and they all lower their heads to the ground, agreeing with him and becoming very quiet. But the leader doesn't seem like he intends to follow through with that promise. And then, one of them informs the boss that he has left. The boss immediately begins plotting against the protagonist, who, while crying, believes that he truly has people supporting him, declaring that those sons of bitches are dead. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the captain who was supporting the protagonist is running into a room, telling Mr. Park that, found a real talent. Already tired of the same old song and dance, he asks if the other man never gets tired of it, and then inquires who has caught his eye this time. He then asks them to take a look at that guy, mentioning that he's the super rookie he found today, and that he's an F rank. They are surprised by this, especially since he only registered as awakened that very day, and he adds that there are even more reasons why he's special, asking if they could take a look at his profile. The other guy, already exhausted, finally agrees, but access to the protagonist's profile is denied, which surprises them. Then Park asks who the hell he is, and the captain asks if he can access it through the back door, which he quickly manages. The blind gorilla became out of control, reaching for the protagonist, grabbing him, and slamming the boy to the ground. He hit a tree backwards, getting a little dizzy from the impact, and allowing him to bypass the block and enter the profile. But when they see it, they realize he's truly something else. Then the captain questions, weren't they supposed to be evaluating him? They seriously doubt that he's an F rank, but asks why his profile is private. Looking at all the information, it seems he hasn't joined a guild, and the captain confirms this, adding that there seems to be more to that guy's story. The captain then asks him to analyze his skills. At that point, he notices that he is a conjurer, and asks what's going on, since his ability provides to Gan bread and water, which the captain finds strange. Park then asks if he thinks the boy defeated Shoigo Chike with just bread and water, thinking about how they attacked him, but there's no way that was possible. Park asks if he knew that guy had been missing for 10 years, commenting that something strange is going on, and wonders if he's a special agent. The captain starts to agree with this hypothesis, as she thought he was strong because of his abilities, but never considered that he might be a member of the intelligence service. Then, Park says that he should give up on the idea of recruiting that guy, because he is almost 100% sure that he belongs to the nation and knew it was harmful when he made all that fuss. But the captain speaks, which is why he was being so indifferent. Then he asks Park to get coffee and questions why a special agent would enter a level 1 dungeon. Then Park questions who doesn't care. However, even so, the captain asks him to continue keeping an eye on Sung, and he says that he already told the captain to give up, but the captain just asks him to give him a weekly report, because who knows, something special might come up. He says it won't happen, because he's said millions of times that he's busy, and so, as they leave, the protagonist arrives at the hospital, so he can see Joao R., the gorilla, filled with rage, attack the boy once again, as the protagonist thought about how stupid it was of him to go against a monster like that, and in the present, the doctor asks him why, asking if he has woken up yet. He is awake and already better, and at that moment, he asks why he bought so much food, and the protagonist says that he heard that eating a lot helps with recovery, handing him a bunch of crap. So he asks if his brother is feeling any better, and Joao R. has already recovered quite a bit, mentioning that he will be able to take off the bandages the next day. Then, he asks if Prota's mercenary test wasn't also tomorrow, and Prota confirms that it is. Then, Jun says that it would be great if he passed the test and was invited to join a guild. However, Prota doesn't like this idea at all, because he, who was once the king of the forest, would never accept joining a gang and becoming someone's lackey. And at that moment, Joao R asks if he should research high-ranking guilds, but Prota says no, stating that he doesn't need to because he's simply going to make one himself, create a one-man guild. Solo leveling worked out well, and that crazy guy became rich and strong, and this guy can tank, but at the very least he needs a truck driver, right? It will be him and the guy who carries all the things. And Jay is surprised that, instead of joining, at 1 o'clock, he's going to do his thing. Elsewhere, Choi is walking calmly when someone calls out to her. She's surprised and asks what the boss wants. Then, he asks her what's been going on with her lately. With her during those days. However, she says it's nothing, but then he points out that there have already been 2 breaches in her area. And if yesterday's portal had been a bridge portal, everything would be in ruins. But Choi asks if they can't do anything without her. So, he gets angry with the girl, asking her to please lend a hand because the portal's department manager has been busting his balls all day. His balls all day long. Then, she questions what he wants her to do, asking if he wants her to resign, but he gets even angrier and says that what he's trying to say is that he did that, and the protagonist says that he couldn't keep running away from territorial fights, and that constantly running away wouldn't solve anything. The doctor was surprised by the boy's response, and the wasting her talent, but she doesn't care much, saying that these days have been difficult for her to stay focused, but he tells her to stop talking nonsense and just read that document. Then she asks what, who gets annoyed until she's surprised, asking why he always gives her the grunt work when she thinks she's finally getting a break, but he questions if she thinks she's the only one. Only one, saying that it's not her first time doing it anyway, but she leaves, completely irritated, so he asks her to wait, saying that this conversation isn't over yet, and telling her not to wander off, rejecting candidates just because she's upset, saying that she knows they're short-staffed and that they need every single person they can get in the field. She says it's better to reject those imbeciles who can't even protect themselves. He keeps calling her a blockhead. Meanwhile, in another corner, several people are gathered, and some idiot starts recording, speaking, with everyone, saying that he's there for the mercenary license test and that if they could show their support, it would be great. He says he'll make sure to pass the test and share a whole bunch of the frantic hunting content that they hype so much, asking viewers to like the video and remember to subscribe to the channel. I'm sure you've reached this point in the video without clicking the like button or subscribing. That's a low blow. You can open the dictionary right now and see that, in the definition of low blow, it says getting halfway through a 2-hour video without subscribing, and liking. And the boy starts laughing at this strategy, saying that the content from the mercenary license test is making him more money than he thought, wondering how much he's going to make from all of this. But then the people in charge of the test enter a location, and he immediately warns the viewers of the live stream that it's about to start, until the protagonist goes after him, stopping and observing what the protagonist says. It's because no matter where you go, there will always be a ruler. As the gorilla charged at him, the protagonist just braced himself for the beating, but as soon as the gorilla gets close, is happening. Then the boy asks what's up, asking if it's the first time he's ever seen a live broadcast. However, the protagonist asks who he was talking to a moment ago, but the kid gets pissed at him for asking if he could give him some space, and the producer gets even more irritated. At that moment, the test leader greets everyone, introducing himself as the major. The head supervisor for the next 3 days then explains that the 21 supervisors present with him will decide if they have what it takes to pass the test. And with that, everyone starts to talk to Xixando about the test itself. Then, the major says he assumes they all received a numbered ticket when they arrived. They will begin selecting supervisors through a raffle. And when they hear their name called, they must form a single line in front of their assigned supervisor, and he begins listing them all. Then, it's Park Hae-soro's turn, and he heads to supervisor number 15, who turns out to be Choi herself, the blonde from earlier. He gets excited about this, since he hasn't seen her in a long time, and the girl is also excited to see him there. So, the major asks them to proceed their respective rooms and rest until further announcements are made, and everyone is sad because of their supervisors, and the live streamer says he even bragged to his viewers that Momon would pass the test easily, but it looks like he will have to be leaving first thing in the morning, and in room 15, he is also with Prota, so they put on their special clothes. Specials. But Prota goes to the boy, asking why he looks so sad, since he was so excited just a moment ago, and the boy doesn't really like talking to him, noticing that he actually ended up in the same group as that guy. Then he questions whether he should dance, asking if Prota has never heard of that crazy woman's antics, saying that there's a reason why. Enough. Raising his arm to kill Prota, one of the wolves lunges at the gorilla, seizing its jugular. Several others emerge to attack the monster, biting all over its body, everyone calls her a witch, and Prota doesn't quite understand, and the boy explains that she's the type who eliminates people just because she's having a bad day. And if you're unlucky and she doesn't like your face, you're in trouble. Your R$200 from the application is gone, but Prota asks if it's the supervisor's fault, questioning if the blame lies with those who didn't prepare. He questions what's going on, noting that he just ignore him, thinking he knew Prota was useless as soon as he saw him. But Prota doesn't quite understand the kid, and he asks his team if they would mind showing respect to their veterans, asking why he has to be against everything he says. However, Prota says that if he has a problem, he questions why they don't resolve it with a fight like real men, because, turns out he knows a good place for them to settle this. Then the live streamer kid asks if they can believe that guy, questioning what he's thinking and if he's an easy prey. And Prota obviously says he thinks he's easy prey. Yes, that's right. So the kid thinks he's making him crazy and asks Prota to fully commit to his determined style. But right after that, Blonde arrives, noticing that the room is empty, and wonders what the hell is going on and where everyone has gone. Then they head to Goal, along with everyone else outside. He gets excited, because it seems like that place is going to be someone's deathbed. So the life kid and Prota stand face to face, and the others outside urge them to hurry up, before the supervisor arrives, because if she finds out, they'll all have to go home. But then the other guy asks, who cares, since everyone is going to fail anyway, and the life kid says that he is one unlucky bastard, saying that he should have thought twice 2 months ago before wanting to fight him, asking if he's never heard of TV Kabamdona, saying that, even though it might not seem like it, he is, killing the gorilla right then and there. Even though it helped him, Prota believes he lost consciousness while watching the pack attack, and at that moment, he genuinely thought it was a promising boxing YouTuber. And Prota asks what a YouTuber is, wondering if it's something to eat, and the kid thinks he's messing with him, saying that it looks like he's going to have to teach him a lesson or two. And so, he starts boxing in front of the protagonist, saying that one of his hobbies is teaching good manners to rude children like him, if only. If he could broadcast that fight, it would probably get around 100,000 views. And the protagonist soon becomes interested in it, as it seems interesting. Dong-soo tells him not to ask, him to pay the hospital expenses when he's done, and goes after the protagonist, trying to land a punch. But just then, the blonde arrives and tells them to stop immediately. He's scared that she's there, and Choi tells everyone to go back to the waiting room now, and everyone runs out. She questions what's going on, asking if they are both so desperate to fail that test. However, Dong-soo says that's not it. He just wanted to have a friendly fight, but she says they don't need to explain themselves and that she just needs one of them to take the CPA. And Dong-soo asks how, which it is. Then she says that whoever loses will fail the test, telling them to proceed. And the streamer, upon seeing her, thinks that she is definitely crazy, but the protagonist attacks him, wanting to argument. So the streamer tells him not to get angry with him, because after all, he asked for it. However, the protagonist also apologizes for this having to happen, and when the streamer charges at him and tells him to shut up, the protagonist dodges, hits him in the chin, knocking him out with a single blow and slamming his face into the ground. And with that, Laura is surprised by the protagonist. Then she thinks about Park Soro, because that bastard is the reason for her distress. And ever since the day she met him, she's had a comfortable feeling that just won't go away. And it's the feeling one gets. But they didn't attack him while he was unconscious. They must have thought he saved the cub, the white wolf cub that had injured its leg. And that cub was the son of the wolf. When encountering an irregular, then he goes to her asking why Choi is so distracted, asking if she wants to fight too, and telling her to get in the ring. And with that, she is questioning what he's talking about. And the protagonist says he has one condition, stating that if he wins, she can't disqualify that guy, so she thinks he must be crazy, dropping his sword and actually entering the ring. Then she asks if he's an irregular, but the boy doesn't even know what that is, so she says she'll tell him if he doesn't die. And when she attacks, the protagonist is surprised, but dodges her punch. Then she prepares to deliver another blow, but he stops that blow as well, and receives several from her at the same time. The girl is being very agile, even kneeing the protagonist. But in the midst of this, he ends up noticing something while she's all happy, saying that if he wins, she will grant him a wish beyond his request. And with that, she lands a kick to the protagonist's face. But after hitting him and falling to the ground, she opens her eyes and sees that the protagonist, it's stuck to the arena's bars. He thinks he is stronger than he initially believed, but she's surprised that he could withstand all of that. Since he was able to handle it, she decides to use more. Applying pressure, she attacks him again, declaring that this time it's truly over. but the Prota easily evades her attack, falling to the ground. As he falls, she attacks again. At him, attempting to strike him. But the Prota evades once more, and the girl continues to hit him, with the Prota defending himself each time, until he notices that she faltered, and as he extends his leg to try and hit her, he bends down, placing his elbow on her leg, and preparing to attack in a different way, and she receives a blow right in the middle of her abdomen, but before she receives it, she, King, leader of the Crimson Wolves, and so, sometime later, on a full moon night, Prota began running with the wolves, even though he was tired, running with the little cub, carrying him in his arms, and uses some of her magic to create a barrier, but the barrier is destroyed, and she is thrown back, left not understanding what is happening, because her shield broke. Then the Prota goes for, he's on top of her again, saying it's his turn to go on the offensive, and she thinks he's being ridiculous, while the boy finds it amusing, and she thinks he really is an irregular, saying yes, she wasn't wrong about that uncomfortable feeling, but he ends up stopping before hitting her because she doesn't want to fight anymore, so she simply says that she surrenders, but he asks why, since the fight was finally starting to get good, and she says that the place is too small for her to use her abilities. They will schedule a fight in a bigger place next time. He thinks it's a shame, but ends up accepting, but then she just asks him to say what he wants. After all, a bet is a bet. Then, he asks if there are many strong females like her on Earth, but she says she can't say there are many. Then he says he chooses her, asking her to have babies with him, and she doesn't understand. Very well, but he repeats himself, saying he wants her to marry him, and in response, he simply gets slapped right across the face, while the streamer can't believe what just happened. Guys, I'm going to talk to you about something serious. If you're single and looking for a partner, don't use this tactic. Seriously, at the very least, you're either going to end up with the police after you, or you'll spend a night in jail. Don't do it, because he's crazy, really crazy. He lived with wolves. Imagine how this guy thinks. And the streamer wonders what happened, and why the blonde is slapping him like that, and, more importantly, why is he lying on the floor, and she leaves, very angry with that crazy guy, who doesn't even understand. However, the streamer, protagonist on a busy street, and he starts talking to his mother, who's telling him to come home for his sister's birthday, but he questions why he should go, and she says that it turned out that, over time, the little cub grew up, and he became part of that pack, and so, in his second year, isolated on the island, he was already howling alongside the wolves, and he says he thinks those, wonders how he got punched, and says that he thinks he lost, and that he has to go home, saying he wasted the app's money, without even doing a test, falling to the floor, saying that it's shameful, but then, he looks at Prota, asking if he's happy now that he got him disqualified. However, Prota says he wasn't disqualified, and he questions what Prota is talking about. But meanwhile, a surveillance camera is filming everything, and a guy is very surprised that Choi So-young lost. And then, Prota simply calls the streamer, but he asks the boy to wait, because how is it possible that he wasn't disqualified? He says that Prota asked her to ignore his disqualification, and questions how he did that, asking why he took a slap, and Prota says he doesn't need to know, leaving things implied. But then, he starts to imagine something, thinking that it was because of him, that he convinced that witch to ignore that confusion, by letting her hit him. He starts to imagine Prota as an angel in his life, saying that that guy is a real man, and starts calling Prota Big Brother, asking him to. He waits, running in a kind of weird way, right? I don't know. It would be better if he ran like Naruto. And then, the loudspeaker in the facility asks him to go to his superior's office as soon as possible. He is surprised and thinks it's about him, so he goes to the location. At that moment, the superior comes face to face with Prota, who questions why he was called. Then the superior says that, before they talk about everything, he wants him to know that everything he says there will be recorded, and Prota agrees. Then the superior says that he saw his little fight with Supervisor Choi So-young and was surprised that a candidate like him managed to stand against a B-rank awakening, saying that he must be an irregular. But Prota says that this is the second time he has heard this question, and asks what an irregular is. The guys accepted him as part of the pack, and in his 31st year of isolation, he was still in the forest, but he had already changed quite a bit, and, in fact, he still hadn't managed to escape from there, and hadn't found it yet. And so he notes that none of the boys know, saying that it looks like someone still needs to inform him about the bridge portals. And in this, he talks about the bridge portals that connect the Earth and 3 other planets, Mid-Ur, Gen, and Aroa. He mentions that the first is Aroa, the home planet of the elves, Earth and Aroa maintain good relations and occasionally engage in economic and cultural exchanges, and Earthlings returning from Aroa learn skills related to magic and artifact creation. The next planet is Gen, inhabited by Mammons and martial artists who are constantly fighting for the planet's sovereignty. The martial artists are their allies, while the Mammons are their enemies. And the last planet is Mid-Earth, which is Retes, a planet ruled by warlike orcs. To make matters worse, that planet is also infested with ferocious monsters, and whenever a portal opens to Mid-Earth, a full-scale war is expected to erupt. Among the Earthlings who returned from those 3 planets, some learned powerful skills. They discovered that their combat power exceeds that of other awakened individuals, and decided classify them as irregular. And Prota thinks this is quite complicated, but he's certain that the place he was in wasn't any of those 3 planets. And at that moment, the superior is quite surprised, since he wasn't on any of those 3 planets. He might just be a dungeon returnee, but there's no way he could be a returnee from an F-rank dungeon who could defeat a rank B like Choi Soy. He then questions which planet Prota returned from. He says that he already told all of this to the bald doctor a long time ago, but he'll repeat it, saying that he lived with wolves for 1,000 years, and upon hearing all of that, the superior was horrified. Prota finishes his story by saying that he understands, thanking the boy for sharing his story, and telling him that he can civilization, but he was already able to kill huge snakes very easily, helping the wolves with their hunt, and so, he became like family to the wolves, and continued participating in territorial fights. Return to the waiting room. As soon as he leaves, the superior starts to become increasingly scared, because if that absurd story is true, this is much more concerning. And just then, Sergeant King, he introduces him, saying he overheard you calling him. Then, he asks if he can take on the role of supervisor for the 15th class, questioning if Choi So-young was supposed to be the one, was in charge of that post, but he says she ran away. Then, Quem asks, "How do you mean, ran away?" And he responds that the details don't matter, wanting him to closely monitor the candidate Park Hae-sor closely and give him a detailed report on him when the test is over. Once again, all the candidates are called and asked to put on their training clothes and report to the field. So, they gather in front of their instructors, and they learn that the 15th team's supervisor has been changed. Everyone is surprised because their supervisor changed, so they wonder if the blonde was fired, but the protagonist realizes that something is wrong. Then, the sergeant arrives, announcing that he will be in charge of supervising Team 15, and says that the minimum requirement for the physical test that day is 9 seconds in the 100 meters sprint and 1 hour to complete the trio, saying it must be easy, but they think he has to be joking, since not all awakened abilities specialize in strengthening physical skills. And apparently that's true, because one of the candidates is disqualified by 3 seconds, and she really doesn't like how things are ranked there. For healers, there should be an easier test, but the soldier asks if she thinks the monsters will go easy on her just because she's a healer. Then, Andon heads to the starting line, and the streamer says that 9 seconds is like taking candy from a baby, telling the protagonist he'll see him in the second round. However, when he starts, he ends up finishing in only 8 seconds. Territorial fights for the family's survival against various types of monsters. Until a time came when he alone killed gigantic boars, and already in his 120th year isolated there, he thinks he is the. And then, Park Sero gets into position to start running, and DS is right up front cheering for the boy. Everyone there was surprised by how quickly everything happened. So, he immediately calls his superior and says that the results of candidate Park Hae-soro's physical test have just come in, and they are quite surprisingly. He says he sent a video, and the superior immediately asks if the reporters who recorded everything are back there, and Kim says they are all over the place. The major calls directly to the director of the returnee center to say that she just sent some videos of Park Hae-soro, telling her that she has to watch them, and she is very surprised, and, after watching them, she almost falls out of her chair, and they say that the major has the ability to detect lies. Therefore, they can confirm that Hank F. told the truth during the interview with Dr. Kim Jung-gu, which surprises her, unable to believe that the doctor's report was true. And for that F-rank lunatic to actually be an irregular, he has to at least be stronger than a B rank. And if that's true, it means Park Sero might be a returnee from a 4th planet. So, she talks to her subordinate, asking him to make absolutely sure that no reporter show up at the training camps. He replies that, regarding that, he thinks it's already too late, because there's already a news story about the protagonist. Then she yells at him to remove all the articles immediately, and place an embargo. But at that moment, all the reporters swarm the protagonist, wanting an interview, and call out to Soro, asking if he can say a few words, while the protagonist just looks away. That president says that this implies Soro somehow managed to maintain his physical condition despite having passed through a portal without protective gear, wondering if he received. Only human on that planet in a constant fight for survival, where he made furry friends but also lost some. He wonders again how many years he has been isolated there, because rank F due to his lack of dimensional energy, and upon further reflection, she realizes that the error in the awakened center's status window also appeared around that time, and she thinks that, anyway, he's a returnee from the fourth planet. Then, the military starts holding back the reporters, as she mentions that South Korea may have just obtained an advantage regarding the project under development on the unknown fourth planet, and all the reporters want to get in, but no one can get through. Meanwhile, inside, everyone is wondering what's going on with those reporters, and they say it's because of the protagonist, and several of them were shocked after seeing the boy's record, and it turns out that, while he's eating that mountain of food, he becomes the center of attention. And Dom, seeing him eating all that, gets excited thinking that this is it, because not just anyone can knock him out on the first try. It's a shame he didn't transmit that question, but instead asks what he's staring at and if he's finished eating, and he says no, asking if Dom is thirsty and offering to get water, acting like subordinate. He says that just by watching the construction worker eat, you can tell he's on a completely different level, and he's sure that he'll become a big shot someday. After that, they head to the locker room to take a nap. Jun-woo comments that, seeing how empty the lockers are, he figures everyone else failed the physical test. However, Prota doesn't even pay attention to that. Jun-woo says that they're screwed, but Prota asks him why. He replies that it's because the next part of the test involves incursions and dungeons. Therefore, teams with more members have an easier time than teams with fewer members. He says he hopes the teachers will consider redistributing the teams, but Prota tells him not to worry because they don't need more people. At that moment, he had forgotten the date, and it seemed like hundreds of years had passed. He wondered how he was still alive. Then, the doctor in the present asks him if, after he becomes king, is horrified by the boy's confidence, saying that he really is a big shot and curses at him. But the thing is, dungeons have so many unpredictable factors, so he thinks it would be easier, and Hernan Medora would be better off if they had more people with diverse skills. But Prota tells him that he already told him not to worry, and most importantly, he asks what he was doing with his cell phone when he first saw him. He replies that he was on YouTube, asking if the boy doesn't know what it is, and Prota really doesn't know YouTube. Then he asks if the boy is living in a cave, and he says yes, since he might as well have been in the middle of the forest. So Jun-woo asks what this guy's deal is, and shows him YouTube, explaining that the number represents how many subscribers he has, and he points out that, as he can see, he has 1,284 people watching his videos. However, Prota, glancing to the side, notices a channel that's much larger than his. He explains that it's because the channel has been around longer than his. Then Prota asks, "What's this thing with 1 million views?" And Jun-woo explains that it's mukbang, and it's very popular with viewers these days. And so, the Prota, seeing that woman eat so much, is impressed. However, Don thinks he really shouldn't be talking like that, because he does almost the same thing, and he says he knows some mukbang YouTubers, and mukbang, and if he's interested, he can get him to appear on one of their streams. And Prota asks if he's serious, wondering if he can really eat all of this, and asks him to promise. Then, Don W realizes that he is a gold mine, while Prota is very excited, saying that he is actually a really good guy after all. Now, let's talk about how your partner has everything it takes to be the next YouTube star. He's a stud, has the perfect body, and even made headlines for breaking a world record. And if he demonstrates his combat power during, even after 500 years, he, one of the wolves, was unable to find any hint of civilization. And ultimately, he asks how the boy managed to return to Earth, and the protagonist, dungeon raids. It will only be a matter of time before all the best guilds have their eyes on him. And if he can do a live stream with that guy, then everything will work out perfectly. To make matters worse, Prota himself said he liked Don W, and even ordered him to join his clan. The boy didn't quite understand, and Prota couldn't understand why he wasn't getting it. So, he asks if he's planning to create his own clan, and if he's interested in joining a guild, but the boy says that's exactly what he wants to do. So, he starts to think a little, but then sees that this could be a chance, because if he makes a video of the clan's creation and goes on the dungeon tour with the best mercenary test candidate of the year, it could mean success. He remembers when he was getting beat up in boxing, saying that boxing was the only thing that made him endure the rotten childhood he had. And despite continuing to fail to obtain a professional license, he hasn't lost his hopes. However, a major disaster took away all of his hopes and dreams. While he was thinking about how he wanted to get rich, he was just drinking with his friends at Mokifo. He mentions what people say, that hope is the last thing to die. So he tried YouTube, and now he has quality content, which is exactly what he was looking for. He can't believe such an opportunity. Like that knocked on his door, and he says he's willing to do anything for the protagonist. Then, he says he's starting to like Don W even more, telling him to keep his promise about broadcasting muck. Bang. And he says he won't go back on his word, crying with snot running down his face. He says that life is about connections, but the protagonist asks why. He started crying out of nowhere, and he lies, saying it's nothing. Then, he asks Soro if he knows that they need at least 3 members to officially create a clan. He is surprised by this, but at that moment, another begins to remember how he started a war against the gorilla race over Lower Hill. And when the wolves were face to face with the gorillas, and the war had begun, he was, Guy, surrounded by a bunch of bald guys, comes over and asks why he appeared out of nowhere, and if it's going to be a Shaolin duel. Then, he introduces himself as Candidate 80, Mongan, and says he has been assigned to Team 15, and it starts with a Buddhist greeting that I won't read because it's too much text that doesn't even make sense together. Note that he is a mercenary monk, and another monk looks around and note that only the 2 of them are there. But then the speaker addresses all the candidates, ordering them to put on their battle gear and report to the meeting room on the 3rd floor within a few minutes. 30 minutes. At this, Don W questions what he's seeing, since they want them to put on their fighting gear at this hour of the night, and the protagonist asks if they won't be going to the dungeon the next day. Next. But the monk says that he was told that sometimes the examiners make dungeon excursions at night without any prior warning, and Don W gets even more freaked out by this. But regardless, all the leaders are being destroyed. Then they announce that they will begin the dungeon raid in a few moments, and the dungeon they will enter for that test is located in the 5th sector is under the protection of the Phoenix Guild, a level 1 dungeon with 250 portals. The protagonist inquires about this guild, and Don W mentions that while they aren't one of the top 20, they are still quite a large guild. He questions the protection aspect, and Don W finds these common knowledge questions strange, wondering if the protagonist might be from another planet. He elaborates, explaining that with portals appearing everywhere, the South Korean government struggled to manage them all. Therefore, the government contracted private mercenary clans to protect the 12 sectors of Seoul. Guild is the term used for a private mercenary clan contracted by the government. In return for their services, guilds gain the right to process the dimensional energy, leading everyone against the Gorilla King. But then something happened, and a red light flashed in front of him. He started to get sucked in the same way he got sucked in front of Truck-kun, from the dungeons they manage. Since the Great Disaster, guilds with larger dungeons have gained increasing power, as the global economy has recognized dimensional energy as a new resource of power. Then the protagonist explains that it's basically a tax-free zone where you're allowed to hunt. And the boy replies that you could say that, and the protagonist thinks to himself that he just wanted to be a part of a clan, because he missed hunting with the pack, but now he realizes he might even be able to acquire land. And Don W comments that it's really great to have your own dungeon, because then, you don't have to pay to use it. And the protagonist then considers that his clan's ultimate goal is to become a guild, but Don tells him to keep his feet on the ground, asking if they shouldn't pass the mercenary test. Mercenary test first. And the protagonist acts strangely, and Don does too, saying that he doesn't understand him, and questioning whether he's just pretending to be dumb, or if he's genuinely dumb. And at that moment, Major says that this is an image showing the portal's location in Sector 5, Route 14. And this dungeon only has 15 days left until its break. It's a labyrinth-type dungeon, with the lowest level of difficulty, and the smallest amount of aid. Monsters from all dungeons. It's a shame they can't acquire much dimensional energy, as the monsters there are weak and few in number, and that's all he has to say. Regarding the explanation of the level 1 dungeon, Domu is surprised by the information, realizing that monsters may not be their biggest problem, and they could get trapped if they aren't careful in the maze. So he thinks it's no wonder people say that success in dungeons depends on skills. He mentions that, if he had a search skill, it would at least be better, but Prota, while lamenting, reveals that he has search skills. Then he starts to get a little more excited about being with Prota, but then he notices something is wrong, because Prota learned and was taken back to the real world, leaving his gun behind. And back in the real world, sometime before this, a blonde woman is holding a reader and talks to the captain, saying that skill before taking the mercenary test, and the skill book costs at least 120,000. He begins to question whether Prota comes from a wealthy background and was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Moon. Look, he probably slept with his butt facing the moon for a very long time. 1,000 years is a long time, but he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. In the beginning, when the trial is about to, as they start out, Mond gets a little tense, and Don W senses this, asking if he has any awakened abilities. Mond looks to the side, looking somewhat dejected, and they both find it strange. So, Mond talks about his past, remembering when he was holding a head, and the monster was coming close to him. While he was inside the temple, the monster arrived outside, along with several goblins, surrounding the area. And then, when a huge monster arrived there, all the monsters were obeying it, invading the place. They arrived shouting Jin, telling him to stop, immediately. He is surprised to see his older brother, and questions what brings him there at this hour. He tells them to take the high priest with them, and evacuate the place immediately. And with that, he takes a scare, as the goblin is already behind his older brother, killing him. And after remembering all of this, he returns to reality with the major talking about the end of the attack instruction briefing, and everyone, they are both surprised by how he reacted. But then the major says that, from now on, they will proceed to the marked target and begin attacking the dungeon with a team led by their supervisor. While moving, they should make sure to read the manual again to familiarize themselves with it. He expects everyone to pass, and that no one fails. And at that moment, in front of the portal, everyone exits from there and gather together with the military personnel, who state that if they don't pay attention, they won't return alive. So, the 3 members of Team 15 are the last to get out of the helicopter, and at that point, he should at least get a gift for her. Meanwhile, some friends call him to invite him to a cyber cafe to play games, but he says he won't be able to go, telling them that he'll see them the next day. Things are strange, as the dimensional energy is out of control, and so the captain orders her to send the coordinates to the portal control team immediately. And with that, they report that they've sent. They ask if they are prepared, and the sergeant says that as soon as they enter, they must act as if he isn't there, and proceed according to the plan. They know that even if the team finishes more die, and individual scores can also eliminate them. Then, Jun-woo asks the supervisor for forgiveness, pointing out that his team is the only one with 3 members, and asking if, should he stay really dangerous, he would help out. With that, he simply tells everyone to go. However, the protagonist asks Jun-woo if he's scared. He replies that it's not that he's scared, but the monk interrupts him, questioning whether they are allowed to use their personal weapons. Sergeant Toquinho says that of course they can, but Jun-woo notices that the monk already had a weapon made of dimensional material beforehand, before they start the mercenary test, surprising him again. Then Group 14 enters, and Group 15 starts to prepare. The sergeant calls them inside once they pass through that door, and they enter the dungeon. O is bothered by the protagonist being in front, saying that it worries him. He shouts at him to set up a perimeter, then realizes he spoke too loudly and lost points, since he should. Having entered silently and secured the area first would have been ideal, but he made noise and attracted the monster's attention. With that, Kin begins to reprimand him, and a monster appears in front of the protagonist, but he is killed instantly with a single punch, and Don starts acting like a maniac, claiming that making noise to lure them in with the umbrella and attract them to a trap was all part of the plan. Then, he talks to the protagonist, asking if he's using the search function as he progresses, and warns that failure will have serious consequences. But at that moment, while he is running, one of them steps on a trap, and when the monk looks down, everything around him begins to change, and Don W realizes that this could be dangerous. Several arrows are fired in his direction, but the monk pulls out his dimensional weapon, preparing to. The coordinates are reached, and at the location of the phenomenon, that same red glow appears before them, leading them to believe a portal is forming, with one of them expressing concern about what might emerge. Do something to counter it. He remembers when his sanctuary was attacked by those monsters. Several missiles were launched at that gigantic creature in an attempt to kill it, and he, in turn, he grabbed his weapon to try and do something while protecting that priest, thinking that everything went wrong because of him, and blaming himself. But presently, he takes out his weapon and starts generating the staff, stopping all the arrows that were heading in their direction. Jun-woo is surprised by how absurd Mon's staff skills are, until they step into another trap. This time, the ground gives way, causing them to fall down below. Then, the gate above them closes, trapping them inside, and they all fall, getting injured, especially Jun-woo. He says that this is how all their dreams disappear, until, when they look forward, monster noises are heard coming from the end of that sewer tunnel. So, he shouts to the other two, saying that he thinks they really attracted attention. Then, Mon asks for forgiveness, explaining that his awakened ability is an area of effect provocation. Ridonu doesn't like hearing that this guy is provoking the monsters. However, the protagonist says that this is a good thing, since he was too lazy to go looking for them himself. However, M doesn't quite understand what the boy is trying to do. So, the protagonist, he jumps over a rock that he lifted, and M is surprised, questioning how someone can kick with such power. And, after completing the jump, he's already up there. Then, the protagonist talks to M, saying that he likes him and asking him to join his clan, but M questions what it's like. Just then, several monsters come towards the protagonist, and he uses search on those things, locating each of them. Then, he charges towards the monsters as they run in his direction, and Donwar says he thinks they really messed up this time. However, the monk, who is already up there, extends his staff. From there, he orders everyone to retreat, realizing it's no wonder he had a bad feeling. One of the low-ranking workers immediately flees, but towards Donwar, pulling him along since he doesn't have much of a choice. He says that he's done with all this, and the provoke and farm operation has begun as planned, getting up there in a rather strange way, you know? He was pulled up there, and when they finally arrive on the same floor as the protagonist, all the monsters are dead, and the scene is unbelievable. So they think this is crazy, and the protagonist asks him to follow and take care of those who are knocked out, and the monk follows the path while thinking that the situation is truly absurd, and they continue killing off the remaining monsters. And the sergeant is even more surprised that the protagonist found the traps by using search. He is advancing at an incredible speed, decimating the monsters while using the traps to his advantage, but he notices something else, as there is even a monster trying to stealthily grab the protagonist from above. However, he looks up just as the monster was about to grab him, but then, the monk throws his staff right at the neck of that monster, killing it instantly. And so the protagonist finishes up, acquiring another 42 achievement points. And after a while, at the mercenaries HQ, they notice that they are returning from the dungeon and are surprised by how quickly it went, as only 30 minutes have passed, even though that dungeon normally takes 5 hours to complete. They wonder if an accident occurred, and they ask for the team number. It's Team 15, and all of their vital signs are normal, as are those of the Parquet Soro team. Just then, the major receives a call, and he says it's the supervisor asking why they are returning so early. Then, Sergeant King tells him that they completed the mission, and the supervisor is extremely surprised. Sergeant King says he will understand when he watches the video, but it will be difficult to assess their capabilities in a level 1 dungeon, since he also broke a performance record within the dungeon. Sometime later, dawn, what emerges from that portal, along with a massive explosion that sends everyone flying, isn't a portal at all. Nevertheless, they remain terrified, desperately not wanting to die, and the blonde is doing a live stream and says that he is introducing the daily live streams of the Soro clan. He explains that this is the clan's vlog, and they ask him what he's going to show. He says that first, they will watch the recently published house tour video of the Soro clan together. Then, he goes to the old woman's house from John R. and asks her to say hello to his subscribers. But the old woman, looking very angry and brandishing a knife, says she has so much to do that he could die, telling him to get out of there before she slices his fat belly and makes salty tripe with his intestines. Your intestines. At that point, he simply loses all desire to do a live stream there. Meanwhile, the little boy asks John R., "What is salt tripe?" And he doesn't even have much to say, much to talk about. And Don R. continues doing his live stream. Even Mond went there, placing a Buddha in the office, and a while later, he goes live again, going to the other two members of the clan, and the two are eating while he's acting silly. Ellis even tries to record a mold, but the monk starts saying a lot of nonsensical things, and Jun R. appears there, talking with his brother, that everything is ready, and Prota calls them to take action, so they grab the truck and head out. As they approach the hunting area, Prota notices something flying, a drone, and points out that there's something in the air. For a while, wondering if he should destroy it, but Don warns him that it's a recording drone, asking if he doesn't know what it is, and mentions that they are currently heading to the quest area in Area 4, Gate 30. Then, he asks if he can see the blue gate past the barrier, stating that today marks the historic day of the Sro clan's first dungeon quest. He speaks with everyone on the live stream before entering, and when they step through the portal, Prota and Naz see bats. Don then explains to him that this is the Bat Dungeon, and at that point, he asks if he, drawing her sword and raising her aura, she declares she will buy them time, urging them to start running. The captain then calls headquarters, requesting emergency reinforcements be sent to, has any long-range abilities, but Prota doesn't. Then, the boy questions how they are going to catch them, but the monk asks them to leave it to him, which they both find strange. So, he simply takes out the gourd and starts hitting it, which causes the bats to start acting strangely, and Tomogawa realizes that they are acting this way because the monk's wooden birimbau is causing a strange disturbance. Strange reaction in the bats, causing them to swarm and attack the monk. As they approach, he stands up, grabs his staff, and prepares to attack, and when they get too close, he uses the fire wheel, imbuing the staff with flames, just like Joy, and simply burns all those creatures, who then move away. But since some are still alive, and the dungeon boss of the bats also appears, he doesn't have much to do, but the protagonist appears, cutting that thing in half with a single attack, finishing it off and completing the mission. And with that, the protagonist asks them to hurry up because the gate has opened, and as soon as they do, they start taking the crystals from inside so they don't leave them there. Meanwhile, everyone watching the live stream goes crazy, and after a while the president is quite surprised. Then Park says that, with their headquarters in Area 4, the three of them are capable of clearing 20 dungeons a day and are completely decimating the level 1 dungeons. And they are very surprised, because Dor has already reached 68,000 subscribers, and she says that she just placed an embargo, but one of her members ended up being a streamer, and Park says that the videos released by Park Sero are third in the real-time popularity ranking. And if they let this go on, they will grow even more. And they wonder if they should take precautionary measures. Precaution, but she says she knows that very well. However, she ends up watching another video of Hero vs. Yorva, the Russian Hulk challenging world champion Okita Hero, and she thinks about this fight, their location. The girl sees that power heading toward her, demanding that thing, whatever it may be, go outside, as it will tear her to shreds. But when she takes a closer look, remembering Okita Hero and listen, and he is the SS rank irregular born in South Korea, and she wonders what they will do if the country carefully approaches with the justification of protect a talent and end up having to deal with the second long. So Park calls the director, who is worried, and she tells him to get ready to contact Park Sero, saying that she will go there in person. Look, girl, I don't know, but you're the closest anyone has gotten to the protagonist recently. He even asked you to go to his house. If I were you, I would be a little more cautious. We start once again in their office, where they notice that the monk didn't go to work, but the protagonist wonders where he could have gone, as he doesn't have a temple. And Jun-woo says that he claims he is living in Seoul with the temple family who survived that day. And Don-woo says that, without him, their hunting effectiveness drops significantly. And at that point, John-R talks to his brother, asking if, at this point, it wouldn't be okay to rest for a while. Day, saying that their clan is ready to renew its level. Then, Don-woo is surprised that it's already time, and Juno says that their clan's account has already collected 140 million won, and he is surprised, because it means they're now able to enter level 2 dungeons. So, he mentions he only gathered blood crystals, but his account balance reached 20 million in 3 days, and if they're able to consistently enter level 2 dungeons from now on, things will improve. The protagonist doesn't quite grasp his excitement, so he comments that it's insane, and if it's true, how many donations will he be able to obtain? And Prota thinks he received over 3,000 achievement points, so he purchased various skills and can now see all those strange things, like viewing the information of the people around him. Then, he says it's all right, and that they'll rest for today. And Joao says he's going to bring someone. Emerging from that glow, she sees a humanoid form and is surprised. The protagonist gazes deep into her soul, and she questions if he is human, noticing that his entire body and Grandma Suke is already heading to a park nearby. The protagonist starts looking at the information of everyone around, unable to see anything about his brother or grandma, but he can see Bako, who is still. He has a combat power of 3. Then he asks if dogs can awaken like humans, so he talks to Joao, asking if he has been putting a lot of effort into fixing the truck. Frequency, wondering if it isn't difficult. He says he doesn't even know where to start, and finding the parts is hard enough, but fixing it is killing him. So he asks what about going to buy a pickup truck soon, a new model, and June is very surprised, and Prota agrees with this, telling Bike G to go too. And so he goes to a store, then gets a huge pickup truck for himself, and June is all excited, because that's what they seriously call a mercenary's dream with Die Drago. Then he starts talking about various specifications of it, and Junro really likes it. So Prota says that he intends to pay in cash, asking if he can drive off with it. They take off in it to another zone, and Joao Ra is very impressed because the car is incredible, and says that it has a level completely different compared to your old crappy truck. And Prota says that even the passenger seat is amazing, remarking that they should have bought it a long time ago. But then he asks why they are going to Area 423, questioning if it isn't a restricted area. And Prota responds that he said he couldn't awaken because he didn't have money. So, he says he's going to awaken Junro now, who is scared to death by what his brother just said. So he stops the pickup truck there, and becomes tense along with Prota, along with Beg Go, who doesn't like that place at all. And Prota asks if Beg Go can smell that smell, saying that the urine odor is definitely from John Goblin. And then Jun speaks to his brother, saying that his whole body is shaking, and the protagonist roars right in front of her, paralyzing the girl. After that terrifying experience, which freezes the girl like Shaves' fit, the protagonist, really uncomfortable, asking if they can't just leave. But Prota opens the door and goes outside, saying he will be back soon, and asking him to wait there with Book. Then Jun-woo begins, calling his brother to come back, but the protagonist disappears from right in front of him at an unbelievable speed, leaving him in disbelief. Meanwhile, back with the others, they are watching a video of the protagonist. They recognize him as the guy who beat everyone to a pulp, and realize that he is the irregular. So, his combat power is also immeasurable, and the mercenary thinks that if he's at that level, it's pointless, until they even hire the assassin. But the subordinate thinks that even so, they can't just let him be. And then, the boss asks for a list of the guilds in Area 4 that they have been frequently sponsoring, but they mention that in Area 4, there's sub-manager Choi, and they remember him, saying that making someone disappear is nothing when they're talking about this guy. So, they say they shouldn't forget how he made 6 scumbags who were in debt disappear last time, and the boss tells them to contact him, instructing them to give him whatever he needs. Spending time on work. Meanwhile, Grandma returns home, getting caught in a heavy rain along the way, until a car pulls up beside her, which she finds strange. And then, that manager from the Lokhtar, the return department, appears near her, asking if she is Lee Ki-ja, and stating that they are from the return department, also asking if they can meet with Park Song-rock, and she thinks, for a moment, questioning whether or not she should pay attention to those people. Meanwhile, Jun-woo thinks he can't see anything while standing in the same place. This irritates those who have already spent more than half an hour questioning what the hell his brother is doing. Meanwhile, Baek doesn't like the atmosphere there at all, and Jun-woo becomes increasingly tense because of it. Until, out of nowhere, a goblin appears at the window, simply collapses in front of her, fainting onto the ground. She calms down a bit as the portal vanishes before her. The captain is surprised that all that pressure, covered in blood, being placed there and beginning to slide down to the floor through the window, until the door opens, and the blood on the floor scares Jun-woo, and the protagonist tells him to leave, making him even more scared. Still, already outside, they stand beside the half-dead goblin, who is feebly trying to do something but remains fallen. Then, the protagonist throws a dagger to his brother, ordering him to follow, while he's killing him. But then, Junro asks his brother to wait and calm down. The protagonist questions why he should. Then Junro questions whether he really has to awaken, but the protagonist says no. It can survive if it is weak, so he orders him to kill that thing quickly. Even in that situation, he still hesitates, and Bick seems quite annoyed. The protagonist tells him to bite, and the puppy rushes on top of that thing, biting its arm. However, the goblin grabs the puppy's head, almost killing him. Then the protagonist says that Bick Go isn't strong enough yet, because he's too young, and says that, if he doesn't stab it, Bick Go will die. So, Junro asks his brother to stop, but the protagonist screams, ordering him to kill it, and the pressure makes that coward start crying while the dog is, they're being killed by the creature, right? Initially, he musters courage and starts acting like a real person, plunging the dagger into the monster's head, killing it, and saving Bako. So, the protagonist tells him to do it again. He continues stabbing that dead thing on the ground until he drops the dagger nearby, completely exhausted from what he just did, staring at the blood on his hand, and becoming desperate with the situation. But the protagonist tells him to pick up the knife. So, Jun-R tells his brother that he really can't, but the protagonist says that if he doesn't kill it, he will die. And Bagu, a tiny puppy, is catching his attention when he glances to the side. Another goblin is there, and the protagonist tells him to follow him while he kills them, as they are short on time, and then he simply leaves, and came from just one person. Then Blonde wonders what kind of power that was just now, because it was a pressure she hadn't felt even against monsters in high-level dungeons. His brother keeps calling out to him, remembering when he was getting beaten up, and the protagonist didn't do anything to help him. And at that moment, he feels like it's the same situation, and ends up taking action. Looking at the monster, grabbing the knife, he thinks about how his brother really is like that. That bastard has always been this way. So, he runs towards the monster, and finally kills it, changing his personality, and also his mentality, telling that thing to shut its mouth. He does this over and over again, stabbing them all, telling the monster to be quiet, once and for all, killing one more, but losing control in the process, stabbing more than he should, telling the monster to die repeatedly, until he finishes off another one. And in this moment, something inside him changes, because he is laughing, enjoying that slaughter. Then, another half-dead goblin charges at him. However, as Jun didn't expect it, the goblin manages to throw him to the ground and almost bites him, but he grabs that dagger and plunges it into the monster's neck, saying that the sticky feeling passing through his hand, the one he gets when he cuts flesh, is something he likes. He wonders why he's doing this, telling himself not to. By doing this, he saves himself, hoping his older brother will do something for him. The protagonist is sitting up there, just watching. Then Junior finally awakens as an F rank, level 1 butcher. Then, he thinks that his brother is really cute, even with that class, and wonders if he happened to work part-time at a slaughterhouse. He says no, but then the protagonist tells him to go over there, and his brother has already snapped. He's totally crazy, smiling while he kills monsters. He tells him that he should take a break, with a bunch of monsters chasing after the protagonist, and a while later, he's all bloody, and the protagonist takes him to register as a mercenary. The girl at the reception asks what happened and why he's like this. The protagonist says that but while he is answering his cell phone in the middle of the street, he bumps into an executive who begins to treat the boy like trash and gets angry because he bumped into him. And the protagonist, level, and she begins to wonder just what the hell this guy is. The captain tells everyone that the situation is resolved and that he's a returnee, ordering an ambulance to be called for him immediately, and already woke up recently. Then she says that, for now, he can clean up in the bathroom, and after being inspected and tested for diseases, he can go to the dimensional energy measurement room, on the 3rd floor. But Jun-R asks what she means by the meter. He explains that it's a machine that measures dimensional energy, and the reading needs to be greater than 100 to register as an awakened F rank. Awakened as an F rank. After that, he'll be qualified to take the mercenary test. He mentions that he scored 96, so he failed, but she argues that it doesn't make sense for her brother to have failed. But then, after showering, he goes to the measuring room and sits down. He starts with a score of 111, and they tell him he can get up now, instructing him to proceed to the ability manifestation room. Ability. The scientist there asks if Seoul will also take the measurement test, and the protagonist lies down to take the test again. As the test begins, something appears on his measurement reading. Several eyes begin to focus on the boy, as the system announces that something unidentified is observing him and recording his information. The boy opens his eyes, causing the machine to have a reaction that they've never seen anything like it before, so they give him a new number, 189. He wakes up terrified because he saw something he can't identify. And then, the scientist says with a smile that his dimensional energy grew quickly, just like the rumors said, indicating that he will soon be in the rankings. However, the protagonist questions who built that machine, and she says she's sure that scientists made it, but he's very skeptical, asking about these scientists because what he saw inside was definitely not good. My friends, if something looks at you with so many eyes, you can be sure it's not a good thing. Oh, if I ever dream about something like that, or if I see it in the mirror, I don't know, man, I'm running, and I'm running fast, and if you wanna, up ahead, doctor. The doctor concludes his consultation, thanking the boy and mentioning that his testimony and medical examination will be shared with the Awakened Center, adding that continuation. You can believe that I'll bring it to you with the greatest pleasure, and I'll see you in the next video as well. I'm out. He seems quite healthy, so he should be released in a few days. At that point, Prota speaks with Dr. Kareka, remarking that this is his first time speaking with a civilized being in 1,000 years, and thanks him for listening to his story. The doctor responds that Prota shared a very valuable personal story with them, and that they are the ones who should be grateful, acknowledging Prota as a warrior of the wild, who has returned after a 1,000-year adventure. However, after the doctor leaves the room and begins walking through the corridors, he reflects that this is an interesting patient, because his story is vividly detailed, and that he would make a great novelist, not believing anything the boy said and thinking it was all a delusion. Meanwhile, back at the Awakened Center, the blonde woman asks the captain if he has, "I'm not sure if this information is correct because it doesn't seem right." And then the captain asks her what's wrong, and there, she says that she's saying that the guy who came out of the portal is a rank F. F. And he says yes, explaining that he is a rare F-rank patient. It's a shame, because if he were a ranker, he would have received government assistance. But she thinks something is wrong because rank F means he is an ordinary person. But she asks how an F rank managed to get through a portal, questioning if he's sure that isn't wrong. And the captain says that maybe he just got lucky, and that happens from time to time, saying that, who knows, maybe he sneaked in there and, with luck, ended up finding a return stone. And he mentions that he just received the doctor's opinion, wonders what Jun-woo likes as a gift. But while he is thinking, something happens, and the buildings begin to collapse due to a rain of yellow rays coming from the sky that starts to strike the entire city, asking if she wants to take a look. Then he says that he has PTSD, a common disorder among F-rank returnees, which means post-traumatic stress disorder. And she reads it, surprised that the protagonist is behaving like a wolf, recalling how terribly he acted towards her, and wondering if it was all just her imagination. But she speaks with the captain, asking if that is the documentation for the returnee, Perot, and he confirms, but reminds her that they still need to treat a returnee as a returnee, according to protocol. So, she requests permission to deliver it personally. He's taken aback and asks her why she wants to do that. She replies that she needs to see it with her own eyes. And so, she goes to the protagonist, who is still in the hospital. He reflects that it has been 2 weeks since he returned to Earth, after spending 1,000 years in another world. He thinks to himself that he had wanted to return more than anything, but now that he's back, everything feels foreign, and he wonders how he should live from now on. Just then, the nurse arrives, smiling, and announces that it's time for his meal. That's how he perceives her and the food she hands him. He accepts his situation, figuring he'll start by filling his stomach first. While he's eating, the blonde arrives, asking about Park Seo and the protagonist are simply sitting on the bed, eating with their hands. The girl is frightened by him, while the protagonist gives her a scary look. She ignores the scene, quite strange person who's in the room, and introduces herself as Choi So-young, saying she's from the Awakening Center. The protagonist keeps eating until he notices that smell, thinking about her. The blonde then says that she looks familiar and that she was the first person he saw when he returned, remembering that Seo definitely looked like a predator when she came out of the portal, but he thinks that city. The protagonist and everyone there are very scared because everything starts to collapse, with buildings falling on people's heads, and everyone runs away trying to protect themselves. How can this be? But maybe there's something wrong with his sensory ability. After he finishes eating, he says the food was delicious, asking the girl what this awakening center is all about. However, she questions why he's speaking to her so informally. However, he reminds her that he's over 1,000 years old, which she finds hard to believe, pointing out that he was a patient, and says that the Awakened Central is a government organization designed to help returnees adjust to society, and this is the information that returnees need to know, saying that he can take as much time as he needs to read it, and for the time being, he should just sign and agree to share his information. The boy is then surprised to see a pen. He says he hasn't seen an object like that in a very long time. Then he starts sniffing the pen, and she questions why he keeps smelling things. He replies that it's been 1,000 years, and they still keep using those things, but she tells him that she asked him to sign, not draw. He apologizes, saying it's been 1,000 years since he last used one like that. Then she starts to questioning whether he's a Neanderthal and getting irritated having to tell him again where he needs to sign and initial. While he's doing that, she wonders if he's just an idiot and speaks to PX, horrified. The boy asks what she wants, and she asks if he learned to draw there. He says he already knew how, signing with a very wolf-like face that was well drawn. She then asks if he learned anything else there, and he questions what she's talking about. She asks about things like magic, voodoo, or martial arts. He says no, that he didn't learn anything like that. He lived in a forest, and to survive, he had to do everything. She asks if, to survive, he spent 10 years running,